It began in the dark, a darkness so absolute that it seemed to breathe. The hum of engines vibrated through the steel hull. The air was thick with oil and sweat, and every sound, every creak, every drip, every distant thud, carried the promise of death. This was not the bridge of a warship or the cockpit of a bomber. This was life inside a U-boat, the German submarine that turned the oceans of the Second World War into hunting grounds. To the outside world, the U-boats were predators, silent, unseen killers, stalking the convoys of the Atlantic. But inside those narrow, stifling corridors of steel, the men who crewed them lived a different kind of war, one measured not in glory, but in endurance. This is the story of that existence, of the men who slept beside torpedoes, breathed recycled air, and fought their battles in total darkness, beneath thousands of tons of crushing water. This is the entire life inside a U-boat, a world of claustrophobia and silence, courage and fear, where every dive might be the last. From the moment a sailor stepped aboard a U-boat, he entered another world, one that smelled of diesel fuel, metal, and sweat. Space was measured in inches. There was no privacy, no sunlight, no fresh air. The corridors were so narrow that two men could not pass without one turning sideways. The crew, usually around 45 to 50 men, shared a space no larger than a small apartment. Every surface was covered in pipes, gauges, and machinery. The bunks were stacked 3 high, squeezed between torpedo racks and engine components. Many men had no assigned bed. They slept in shifts. Hot bunking, one sailor climbing into the same cot. Another had just vacated, still warm with his body heat. The air was thick, humid, and stifling. By the second day at sea, it reeked of oil, salt, and unwashed bodies. Every breath carried the scent of machinery and men. There was no day or night inside a U-boat, only the endless rhythm of the sea. The crew lived by the clock, their lives ruled by watches, alarms, and orders barked through narrow passages. Meals were hurried affairs, eaten from tin plates in the flickering glow of red lights. Fresh food spoiled quickly in the heat, so the men lived on canned meat, stale bread, and coffee so bitter it burned. The air was rationed. The oxygen grew thinner with every dive, and the carbon dioxide made them light-headed, slow, and irritable. Every movement had to be careful, precise. A single mistake, a valve turned the wrong way, a hatch left unsecured, could mean disaster. And through it all, the constant sound, the hum of the electric motors, the whine of the propellers, the creak of pressure against the hull, the distant whisper of the sea, pressing in from all sides. When the U-boat surfaced, the crew came alive. The hatch opened to the cold rush of wind and salt, and men scrambled onto the conning tower, gasping fresh air for the first time in hours, sometimes days. The ocean stretched endless and silent, a cathedral of stars above, black water below. For a moment the claustrophobia lifted, but it never lasted long. Orders would come to dive again, a ship spotted or an aircraft approaching, and the hatch would slam shut. The klaxon would sound alarm, alarm, dive, dive. Within seconds the deck tilted, the hull shuddered, and the light vanished as the boat slipped beneath the waves once more. The men moved with rehearsed precision, closing valves, shutting bulkheads, monitoring depth gauges. The hull groaned as the pressure mounted. Every creak felt like the whisper of death, every sound a reminder of how thin the barrier was between life and oblivion. In combat, there was no room for hesitation. When a target was sighted, a convoy, a freighter, a destroyer, the U-boat became a predator. The captain, Usually a man in his 20s would peer through the periscope, his face lit by the green glow of instruments, calculating speed, angle, and range. The order would come: loss, fire. The torpedo would lurch from its tube with a violent hiss, the boat rocking with the recoil. Then came the longest minutes of all, waiting in silence, counting down, listening. And then, boom, the ocean flashed white. A distant explosion echoed through the deep. Cheers erupted in whispers, restrained and exhausted. But triumph never lasted long. The U-boat Sepp's true enemy was not the merchantman. It was the escort, the hunters. Within moments, destroyers would converge, their sonar pings echoing through the water, a mechanical heartbeat of death. The men waited in the dark, hearts pounding, as depth charges rumbled closer and closer. The first explosion was always the worst. A dull thud that made the lights flicker and the hull quake. Then came another and another, water sprayed from pipes. Bolts rattled loose. The noise was deafening, relentless, the sound of the ocean trying to crush them. Men clung to the bulkheads, their faces pale, their hands shaking. Some prayed, others cursed. Each blast seemed closer than the last. Sometimes the pressure hull would buckle, and everyone would hold their breath, waiting for the sound that never came, the sound of implosion. When it was over, they would sit in silence, covered in oil and sweat, staring at each other in the dim red glow, too exhausted to speak. And then, as the destroyers moved on, the engines would start again. The U-boat would rise slowly, gasping for air like a living thing. Life aboard a U-boat was a paradox of extremes: isolation and brotherhood, boredom and terror, triumph and despair. The men became a family bound by shared danger. They celebrated small victories, a successful dive, a clear night, a letter from home. But they also shared nightmares. Sickness spread quickly. The air grew foul. Batteries leaked acid that burned the skin. Salt water seeped into everything. And always the ocean pressed closer. On long patrols, reality itself began to blur. Some men dreamed of sunlight and could no longer tell if they were awake. Others talked to the boat as if it were alive. The war outside, the world above, became distant, almost unreal. There was only the sea, the sound of the engines, and the knowledge that death could come at any second. By 1943, the war beneath the waves had turned against them. The Allied convoys grew stronger, escorted by aircraft, radar, and sonar. The hunters had become the hunted. The U-boat arm, once the pride of Germany, was being annihilated, the highest casualty rate of any branch in any major military during the war. Most went down without a trace, their steel coffins resting forever on the seabed, their final moments lost to history. And yet, even as defeat became inevitable, the crews kept sailing, driven by duty, by loyalty, by a strange, fatalistic pride. To live inside a U-boat was to live at the edge of existence, to know what it means to be utterly alone, surrounded by nothing but silence and pressure, courage and fear. It was not the glory of the sea that defined them, but its indifference. In that narrow tube of steel, a handful of men fought a private war against the world's most merciless enemy, the ocean itself. Tonight we descend into that darkness once more, into the corridors of steel and the heartbeat of the deep, where silence was survival, and every breath could be the last. This is the entire life inside a U-boat: claustrophobia, courage, and the eternal stillness of the sea. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you tonight? The ocean has always been a place of silence, stretching endlessly in every direction, a surface that hides more than it reveals. Sailors have long spoken of its mysteries, of depths where light vanishes and only imagination remains. To drift upon the water is to know one world, but to sink beneath it is to enter another. The ocean floor is as remote as a distant planet, unreachable, unknowable, and filled with quiet shadows. It was into this realm that men in World War II ventured, inside narrow tubes of steel. A submarine was not simply a vessel, but a promise to live between life and death, between air and water. To enter it meant surrendering to a silence thicker than any known on land, yet silence was not emptiness, but presence, an invisible weight pressing on hull and mind. And so begins the story of life within a U-boat, a fragile capsule carried beneath the waves. The ocean, vast and eternal, welcomes us slowly into its embrace. The submarine itself was a contradiction, both strength and fragility, both machine and coffin. On the surface it looked ordinary, a grey hull that rode the waves like any other ship. But once submerged it became something uncanny, a creature without sails or wings, slipping unseen below the skin of the sea. Inside, men lived shoulder to shoulder, enclosed by steel no thicker than a man's hand. Every valve, every bolt, every plate was the boundary between survival and ruin. The pressure outside was invisible, yet always waiting, like an unspoken threat surrounding them. The men did not dwell on it in words, for to speak of it would be to invite it too close. Instead they trusted the craft, and they trusted one another, because trust was the only air they truly breathed. To enter such a space was to surrender one's body to the machine, and one's spirit to silence. Slowly, one feels the weight of confinement settle, like the ocean itself pressing inward. To those above the water, submarines were creatures of rumor, feared and unseen. Merchant sailors whispered about torpedoes, striking without warning, about wakes on the waves that meant death. Naval officers studied reports, but much of what they knew was still shadow, an outline of an enemy they could not touch. The very idea of the submarine unsettled them, for it was an enemy that lived beneath visibility. Unlike surface ships that could be seen, hunted, and fired upon, the submarine belonged to an invisible world. The ocean was its shield, and silence its camouflage. It seemed less like a vessel, and more like a whisper that could turn into thunder at any moment. For this reason, many thought of U-boats not as ships, but as phantoms of steel, living just beyond sight. Even when one was destroyed, the sea swallowed it so completely that only silence remained. The fear of the unseen became as powerful as the weapon itself, a shadow carried in every convoy. For the men who chose to sail inside them, there was a different mystery, one of endurance and belonging. Each crewman stepped into the vessel, knowing he would not see the sky for days, weeks, sometimes months. The sea outside became both enemy and companion, unseen but always near. The submarine shrank the world to narrow corridors, damp bunks, and shared breath. Men slept in shifts, worked in shifts, and lived in the presence of one another, sits, every movement. The ocean was outside, immense and formless, while inside was a life of order, regulation, and closeness. Yet this closeness forged bonds that could not have been made anywhere else. A submarine demanded not only discipline, but also quiet acceptance of limits. Each man became part of the machine, and the machine became part of each man. To step aboard was to surrender to a life unlike any other, one that belonged entirely to the depths. Life inside was not simply a matter of walls and machinery, but of time itself. On the surface, a day could be measured by the sun, by shadows moving across decks, but beneath the waves there was no dawn, no dusk, only the slow ticking of watches and the dim glow of lamps. Time stretched and folded in strange ways, long hours of stillness broken by sudden moments of decision. The crew learnt to live by routine, by meals, by shifts, by habits that gave rhythm where nature had removed it. Without these anchors, days would blur until memory itself became unreliable. A patrol might last only weeks, but to the men inside it could feel like months. The body remembered only the constant sway, the constant hum, the constant closeness. This rhythm, steady and relentless, shaped not only their days but their minds. Slowly the listener can feel the narrowing of hours until time itself feels submerged. Yet in this silence there was also beauty, though a beauty unlike any known above. At periscope depth, a captain might rise just far enough to glimpse the horizon, where waves glittered like scattered stars. To hear the distant sound of a storm through the hull was to feel nature sip's vastness without ever seeing it. At night, when surfacing was safe, the men would climb to the conning tower and see stars unbroken by light. The sea stretched in every direction, black and endless, and the horizon became an unmarked circle. The taste of cold air after days of stale breath felt like a gift from another world. Even in war, even in fear, moments like these lingered as memories worth keeping. The submarine carried them away again soon after. Back to silence, back to pressure, back to the hidden life. The ocean offered both menace and majesty, both threat and wonder. Within its vastness, men found a quiet awe that no enemy could erase. To understand a U-boat is to understand both confinement and infinity. Inside was a chamber smaller than many homes, a place where every object had its fixed place. Outside was an ocean stretching farther than any horizon, an expanse that seemed to swallow whole continents. These two realities pressed against each other with every dive. The men within balanced on that thin line where steel met water, where sound ended and silence began. Each patrol carried them deeper into this paradox, into a life that was both narrow and immense. For some, the pressure of confinement weighed heavier with each passing day. For others, the quiet certainty of belonging created a strange calm. Between fear and stillness, between life and risk, they drifted. And so, as the story begins, we find ourselves suspended between two worlds. The ocean remembers all things, but it reveals them slowly, and often only to those who dare descend. For the men of the U-boats, that descent was not only physical, but also inward into the recesses of human endurance. To live inside steel, beneath miles of water, was to confront silence in its purest form. Silence that was heavy, silence that was alive, silence that demanded patience. Every patrol was a journey into that silence, and every return was a brief escape from it. But the silence was never forgotten, never truly left behind, for it clung to the men long after they returned to shore. It shaped their thoughts, their memories, their sense of time and space. Even now, the image of those silent depths lingers, carried by the ocean that still surrounds us. As we leave this first glimpse behind, we begin to follow the men more closely into the narrow halls of the vessel itself. And so the descent continues deeper into the life inside a U-boat. A U-boat was never built for comfort, but for survival beneath the sea. From the outside it looked like a simple cylinder of steel, narrow at the ends, grey against the waves. Inside, It was divided into compartments that barely allowed a man to stand upright without brushing against pipes or bulkheads. Every inch was claimed by machinery, cables, or weapons, leaving little space for those who lived within. There were no wide corridors, no rooms to retreat into, only passageways so narrow that men brushed shoulders as they passed. The hull was a shell no thicker than a man's arm, separating them from the enormous weight of the ocean. This thin wall groaned softly under pressure, reminding the crew of its limits. Yet within those limits they lived their entire world, eating, sleeping, and breathing inside that fragile casket. The vessel was both prison and shield, both confinement and protection. To enter it was to surrender freedom of space, but to gain the promise of hidden strength. The forward compartment held the torpedoes, massive cylinders that filled the space like silent beasts. Men slept among them, hammocks strung over their metallic forms, each bunk only as wide as a man sits shoulders. At night, the smell of oil and metal mixed with the sound of slow breathing. The torpedo room was both arsenal and bedroom, a place where the tools of destruction shared space with dreams. Above the tubes, valves and levers jutted out, filling every inch of ceiling and wall. A careless movement could strike one ship's head, a reminder of how little space there truly was. Yet the men grew accustomed, moving with practiced care, weaving through the tightness as though it were natural. To them the presence of torpedoes became no stranger than a chair in a living room. They accepted the strange coexistence of war and rest. In this way, the submarine demanded adjustment from body and mind alike. Moving aft, one would pass through hatches, just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. Each hatch was round, edged with thick steel, designed to hold back the pressure of the sea. Passing through meant ducking, twisting, and climbing, always aware of the narrowness that surrounded you. Beyond the torpedo room lay the control room, the very heart of the submarine. Here were the diving planes, the ballast controls, the periscope, and the charts. It was always crowded, always filled with voices and footsteps, for this was where decisions were made. The walls here were lined with gauges that flickered softly in the dim light, their needles twitching as the submarine lived. The floor was slick with condensation, the air filled with the faint scent of oil and sweat. This was the space where steel and sea met most clearly, where control was both fragile and absolute. To pass through it was to feel the pulse of the submarine itself. Behind the control room stretched the officers' quarters and the mess, though they were only slightly less crowded than the rest. The officers slept in small bunks, no more comfortable than those of the crew. The mess table was narrow, with benches close enough that knees touched. Meals were eaten in shifts, since the entire crew could never fit at once. Above the table hung pipes, wires, and instruments, so low that men often bowed their heads without thought. Along the walls were lockers barely large enough to hold essentials, for personal belongings were few. Here men shared not only food, but conversation, laughter, and the rare moment of rest. It was in these cramped quarters that friendships grew strongest, for there was nowhere else to go. In the mess time slowed, if only for a little while. Beyond its narrow benches, the submarine still pressed in from every side. Farther aft were the bunks of the enlisted men, crowded and stacked like shelves against the steel. Each was no longer than a man-sip's body, no wider than his shoulders, and often damp from condensation. Privacy did not exist. Only a curtain or a turned shoulder could offer a moment's solitude. Many men shared bunks in shifts, sleeping in what was called hot bunking, one lying down as another rose. The air here was heavy, filled with the mingled smell of bodies, oil, and food that never left the submarine. Yet men learned to find comfort in the rhythm of breathing, in the closeness of their comrades. The bunks became both shelter and cage, places of rest in a world that allowed no escape. To lie in one was to feel the thrum of engines through steel, a vibration that became part of every dream. Even in sleep, the submarine reminded them it was alive. These bunks were small islands in a sea of machinery, fragile sanctuaries inside steel. At the stern lay the engines, the noisiest part of the vessel, roaring when on the surface and humming quietly when submerged. Diesel fumes hung in the air, mixing with heat and sweat, making the space stifling and close. Men working here labored among gears, pistons, and spinning shafts, their movements choreographed to the rhythm of machinery. The engines consumed space as if alive, leaving only narrow paths to move between them. When submerged, the air turned electric with the smell of batteries, a sharp scent that filled the lungs. It was dangerous work, for one mistake here could doom the entire vessel. Yet those assigned to the engine room grew used to the constant noise until silence felt unnatural to them. Their hands knew the feel of steel, their ears the subtle changes in pitch. Even in the deepest hours of the night, the engines whispered of survival. The stern was both furnace and heartbeat, essential to the U-boat's hidden life. Everywhere inside the submarine, the air was thick with smells that never left: diesel, sweat, food, oil, and damp metal. There were no windows, no view of the horizon, only walls of steel enclosing all senses. Light came from dim bulbs strung through narrow passageways, glowing faintly against condensation. The ceiling was low, the walls close, the sound constant, whether from engines or from the sea, pressing against the hull. Men adapted their movements, bending without thought, sliding sideways, crouching in passageways. To a visitor, it might feel unbearable, but to the crew it became routine. The submarine shaped their bodies and habits until they belonged to it as much as it belonged to them. The confinement, though oppressive, became part of their daily existence. The men learned to live in this steel casket, as if it were the only world that existed. Slowly the submarine itself seemed less a vessel and more a way of life. This was the design of the U-boat, a vessel built to vanish beneath the sea, at the cost of comfort and space. It carried weapons and men with just enough room for both, and nothing more. Every surface, every corner, every pipe was necessary, leaving no space unused. The narrowness was a burden, but also a shield, for it allowed the submarine to move unseen. Those who entered accepted its demands, because without acceptance there could be no survival. The steel casket was their world, their fortress, and their prison. Yet within it they found a strange familiarity, a rhythm of life shaped by closeness. Claustrophobia became routine, and routine became endurance. What seemed unbearable at first became simply the way things were. And as the steel groaned softly against the weight of the sea, the journey into silence continued still deeper. The men who filled a U-boat were, for the most part, remarkably young. Many were in their early 20s, some scarcely older than boys, yet burdened with immense responsibility. They had been chosen carefully, not only for skill, but for endurance, loyalty, and a quiet acceptance of hardship. To survive in such a vessel required not only technical knowledge, but also a temperament that could endure confinement. Courage was not measured in moments of battle alone, but in the ability to live calmly in close company day after day. The men learned quickly that their world would be measured in inches, not miles. They brought with them photographs, small keepsakes, and sometimes a letter or two folded away, but very little more. Their personalities had to bend like steel under pressure, for conflict in such a place could not be afforded. They entered the submarine not only as sailors, but as companions in endurance. And so the small world of the crew began to take its shape, fragile yet unbreakable. Life within this space drew men together in ways few other environments could. A man's sits habits, his manner of speaking, his patience or impatience, all became magnified in the closeness of the submarine. There was no private corner to retreat to, no door to close, only the nearness of others. In this way, friendships grew quickly, for laughter and understanding were needed as much as food or air. A joke shared in the mess might echo for days, lightening hearts when silence weighed heavily. Yet the same closeness could breed tension, for irritations had no place to escape. A misplaced word, a careless gesture, could spark tempers that had no space to burn out. The men learned to restrain themselves, to forgive quickly, for harmony was as necessary as discipline. They became brothers, not by choice, but by the needs of survival. And in their brotherhood, the submarine's narrow hull became something more like a home. Each man had his role, and his tasks were repeated with the rhythm of the sea. There were helmsmen, mechanics, cooks, torpedo handlers, navigators, and watchstanders, each trained to precision. Their duties rotated in shifts, for the submarine never slept. Even when the men longed to, at any hour, someone was awake, tending machinery, steering course, or listening through headphones for the faintest sound from above. Discipline was strict, but within it there was a shared understanding, a silent agreement that each life depended upon the other. No task was insignificant, for even the smallest neglect could ripple into disaster. And yet, despite the weight of this responsibility, the crew found ways to make life bearable. A story might be told during a meal, or a tune hummed softly while off duty. These small details gave color to the grey walls around them. In this rhythm of work and fellowship, their world of steel gained a touch of warmth. Meals were the center of the day, even if the food was simple and sometimes poor. A slice of bread, a bit of sausage, or a steaming mug of coffee could bring comfort greater than one might imagine. The men looked forward to these moments, for they marked the passage of time more surely than the unseen sun. In the mess, voices softened, laughter rose, and the clatter of utensils filled the air with a rhythm different from machinery. The cook, though his supplies were limited, held a place of quiet respect, for he fed the spirit as much as the body. Around the narrow table, sailors spoke of home, of places they longed to see again, or of memories that bound them to their lives ashore. In these conversations, they escaped, if only for a while, the pressing steel walls. Even silence here felt companionable, filled with the presence of others who understood. The submarine became less a prison and more a shared vessel of survival. And so, even in the deepest water, men carried within them a sense of belonging. Small comforts took on great importance in this enclosed life. A cigarette smoked on deck during rare surfacing was remembered with gratitude for days. A letter received before departure, folded carefully into a pocket, was read in the mind when sleep refused to come. Even the sound of music, played from a small gramophone, though rare, lifted hearts and softened the edges of monotony. These were not luxuries, but necessities of the soul, sustaining morale when conditions grew heavy. Each man clung to such details in his own way, and in sharing them, the crew found common ground. A kind word, a shared joke, or the simple act of offering coffee meant more than grand gestures ever could. The submarine, though tight and unyielding, became filled with unseen threads of kindness. These threads held men steady, as surely as steel held the vessel together. Within closeness they discovered resilience, and resilience in turn became a quiet kind of strength. But strength was not constant, and moments of strain crept into the silence. Exhaustion, heat, and confinement wore on the nerves of even the most patient sailors. Disagreement sparked quietly, sometimes over something as simple as a misplaced tool or a careless remark. Yet in the submarine, anger had no place to hide, and so it burned quickly, often replaced by uneasy laughter or apology. Officers watched carefully for signs of wear, for they knew the mind could falter as surely as machinery. Still, discipline held, and so did the bonds of shared experience. The men understood that they were part of something larger than themselves, part of a machine that demanded unity. Tension might rise like the sea in a storm, but it always settled again, carried away by routine. The crew learned not only how to endure, but how to endure together, and this togetherness became their truest defense against the vast weight of the ocean. At night, when shifts changed and lights dimmed, the submarine grew quieter. Though never fully silent, men lay in bunks, listening to the hum of engines, to the soft breathing of comrades nearby, and to the creaks of steel against water. Dreams came quickly, often shaped by the sounds of the vessel itself, until even sleep belonged to the rhythm of the sea. In these hours, thoughts of home often returned, filling minds with distant faces and forgotten landscapes. Yet the presence of others was a comfort, a reminder that no one endured the silence alone. A hand brushing past in the dark, a cough in the distance, a whispered word, these were enough to remind each man of belonging. They were individuals, but together they became something greater, bound in steel and trust. Their small world was confined, but within it grew vast emotions, hopes, and memories. And through the quiet hours of the night, this small world carried them safely onward. The crew of a U-boat lived in spaces measured by inches, but their endurance was measured by the bonds they forged. They were not merely sailors, but companions in the truest sense, sharing confinement and finding solace within it. Their youth carried them through hardships, their loyalty bound them to one another, and their adaptability shaped their survival. Though the submarine was narrow and unyielding, it contained a human world rich with laughter, tension, routine, and comfort. This was their universe, steel walls surrounding them. Yet within those walls, a fellowship that could not be broken. In their unity, the crew transformed the submarine from machine into living home. They were bound not by walls, but by trust, and in trust they endured. This endurance made the impossible seem possible, even beneath miles of ocean, and so their small world drifted onward, carrying us gently toward the next chapter of their hidden life. The first sensation inside a U-boat was not the sight of steel or machinery, but the air itself. It pressed close upon the lungs, heavy with a mixture of oil, fuel, and the dampness of the sea that seeped through hatches and seams. Fresh air was a fleeting luxury, swallowed as soon as the submarine submerged beneath the surface. Every man felt the difference within minutes. The crispness of open air, replaced by a lingering thickness that seemed to cling to the skin. As the hours lengthened into days, that thickness grew more layered, more complicated. As new scents joined the old, the diesel fumes of the engines, the sharp tang of battery acid, the earthy weight of sweat, and the ever-present trace of food all mingled together. To step inside was to leave behind the clean separation of the outside world and enter an atmosphere that belonged only to the boat. The air became not just a necessity, but a shared condition of life, binding everyone together with each breath. Even in silence, men inhaled the same mixture, exhaling it back into the narrow passageways to be breathed again, and with each breath the boat felt smaller, drawing the crew further inward. The longer a patrol continued, the more the men noticed subtle changes in their breathing. The first days carried an adjustment, the body learning to ignore the fuel-soaked smell and the faint taste of iron in the air. After a week, the sense of normalcy returned, though it was a normal built upon constant compromise. When the submarine submerged for long stretches, oxygen was rationed not by measure but by endurance. Each cigarette smoked, each whispered conversation, each engine run left a trace in the air, reminding the men of their collective dependence. It was an invisible resource, more precious than fuel and more fragile than steel. The officers knew the limits, calculating how long the crew could remain below before surfacing was unavoidable. But the men simply breathed, trusting that the same air filling their lungs filled the lungs of everyone else. The air was not truly theirs, but shared, and in that sharing, a strange intimacy grew. It was life reduced to its most basic form, yet also life pressed together so tightly that no man could forget the presence of another. With every hour that passed, breathing became less an act of habit and more an act of quiet endurance. Smells carried memory as much as presence, and on a U-boat, those memories lingered for weeks. Bread fresh from port gave way to the sour hint of mold, butter turned rancid with heat, and meat released its odor long before it spoiled completely. The metallic bite of machinery mixed with the saltiness of bodies working without pause, turning the submarine into a kind of moving cellar. Men would sometimes joke about it, saying the air tasted like an old coat or a damp cellar back home. But laughter did little to hide the truth, for every man knew that these odors marked the slow passage of time at sea. They became a calendar of scent, telling when food supplies were dwindling and when the body itself carried more weight than any ration. Still, after weeks, the nose learned to adjust, dulling itself to survive what could not be changed. The sharpness softened, the edges blurred, and what had once seemed unbearable became background. This adaptation was not comfort, but necessity, for there was no fresh breeze waiting to sweep the atmosphere clean. And so the men learned to live inside the very weight of the air, as though it were another layer of steel around them. In such ways, the submarine shaped not just their lungs, but their sense of time and space. Recycled oxygen carried with it another sensation, an odd thinness that reminded men of climbing mountains without leaving the sea. As levels dropped, headaches grew sharper, thoughts slower, and movements heavier. The men seldom spoke of it aloud, though everyone noticed when the air turned stale, when breathing felt like work instead of ease. Officers monitored these changes carefully, counting hours and conserving energy, yet there was no escape until the boat surfaced. The sea above was both a barrier and a promise, holding fresh air just out of reach. At night, when hatches finally opened, the rush of clean, cold wind filled the compartments like a blessing. Men stood near the openings, drawing in great lungfuls as if to store them deep inside for later. It was a fleeting relief, for once the submarine slipped below again, the weight of recycled breath returned at once. This cycle of deprivation and renewal defined much of life beneath the waves, and each man felt it in the simple rhythm of his lungs. The air was life, and yet it was never truly free, and in that quiet struggle for breath, the submarine revealed both its gift of survival and its constant reminder of fragility. The smell of oil and fuel was never absent, and with it came a kind of comfort as well as discomfort. To some it meant safety, proof that the engines still worked, that life continued. To others it was a constant intrusion, staining clothes, hair and skin, until it could not be washed away. Even weeks after returning to port, sailors carried the scent with them, as if the submarine clung to their very bodies. Families noticed it when embracing them, a faint shadow of the boat that followed men ashore. The crew themselves sometimes welcomed it, for it was proof of belonging to a world few could imagine. Each inhalation reminded them of duty, of the invisible thread that tied them together in silence. The smell, unpleasant to outsiders, became part of the very identity of those who served below. It was both a burden and a badge, carried through every breath and every moment of wakefulness. Thus the air became more than atmosphere. It became memory itself, settling upon the men like an invisible cloak. And through this, the submarine deepened its hold over every man who sailed within it. Claustrophobia often began not with walls or space, but with the air pressing close. In narrow bunks and crowded passageways, men found themselves longing for a single deep breath of untouched wind. Sometimes, even when oxygen levels were safe, the imagination turned against them, whispering of staleness and suffocation. In such moments, silence grew heavier, and the awareness of breath filled the mind completely. A man might wake in the night, startled by nothing more than the sound of his own lungs working in the stillness. Yet he would calm himself, breathing slowly, matching his rhythm to the quiet pulse of the engines. This ritual of control became a survival skill, as important as handling a torpedo or steering the boat. Breath became not just necessity, but discipline, a way to master the body when space and time could not be mastered. Through this, men discovered resilience in small acts, holding on to calmness even when the air itself felt scarce, and in this manner the breath of one man became the anchor of another, tying the crew together in silence. The psychological weight of shared air was balanced by the bond it created. To live so closely, breathing one another, Sit's presence, was to dissolve certain barriers of individuality. Every cough, every sigh, every sharp intake was part of a collective existence, making privacy nearly impossible. Yet within this constant intimacy, trust grew stronger, for each man's life was tied to the endurance of his companions. No one could escape the atmosphere, and so all endured it together, building resilience, not just from strength, but from solidarity. The act of sharing breath was not spoken of, but it was understood, a silent pact carried in the lungs. Each man learned patience, tolerance, and an acceptance of the small discomforts that came with survival. In this way, the air itself became a teacher, shaping character as much as circumstance. What could have divided instead united, binding men to one another more deeply than words could. And as they breathed, they carried forward not just the weight of the air, but the strength of each other. In time, the crew came to regard the submarine's air as part of its identity. It was not pleasant, but it was theirs, inseparable from the long patrols and the endless rhythm of the sea. Stepping ashore into fresh wind felt almost strange, too open, too free, as though the world itself had no boundaries. Some men longed for that freedom, while others in their silence found comfort in the very closeness they had endured. The submarine left its imprint not just on their lungs, but on their memories, a reminder of life lived in the narrowest of spaces. Air became story, a language of scent and breath that only those who had served could fully understand. It was part of the invisible history, one that left no photographs or records, yet lived within every man who surfaced again. And so the air of a U-boat was more than atmosphere. It was the silent echo of survival. With each breath, the crew wrote their own hidden chapter of endurance upon the sea. And in the stillness of that endurance, the story carried forward into the next world of confined life. There is a moment when a U-boat slips beneath the waves, subtle yet profound, when the familiar world above is left behind. The engines slow, then stop, and the usual hum of machinery fades into silence. Men feel the shift first in their bodies, a gentle tug downward as pressure begins to press from all sides. The water around them is invisible, yet its presence is unmistakable, surrounding the steel hull in a quiet embrace. Light diminishes slowly, fading from bright shimmer to muted grey, until the sun becomes only a memory. The men pause, listening to the absence of sound, the gentle creaks of metal adapting to its new load. Every breath seems deeper, heavier, carrying the faint taste of damp steel and the ocean itself. There is a strange beauty in this moment, a serene reminder of the vastness outside. And yet, beneath that beauty, there is also a soft unease, a whisper of the unknown that stretches endlessly below. Slowly the submarine continues its descent, entering the hidden world of the deep. The surface becomes a distant layer, a horizon that no longer guides or reassures. Waves above shimmer briefly before vanishing, leaving only the uniform grey that the eye cannot penetrate. The air inside remains unchanged, yet feels different, carrying a subtle weight as the water outside presses closer. Men instinctively feel the contrast between the open sky they left and the closed chamber that now surrounds them. Their hands rest on the walls, on valves and bulkheads, sensing both the stability and the tension of the vessel. There is no rush, only the steady adjustment of the body and mind to new circumstances. Each man notices the quiet, the absence of normal motion, and the sudden awareness of his own presence. In these first moments beneath the surface, the world feels suspended, as though time itself has slowed. The submarine is alive in its stillness, each metal seam a soft reminder of the ocean's weight, and as the hull settles, the crew drifts with it into the gentle rhythm of the deep. The first hours below are marked by a subtle change in perception, a shift that is at once physical and emotional. Light becomes an idea rather than a fact, a distant memory of warmth and brightness. Shadows move differently, cast not by the sun, but by the faint glow of instruments and lamps. Sounds travel oddly, echoing or fading, creating a space where silence has texture. Even breathing feels altered, heavier, as though the body negotiates with the water that presses unseen. The submarine itself seems to sigh, metal expanding and contracting as the pressure balances. The men move with care, aware that every shift in weight or step might create a sound that carries further than expected. Conversation is subdued, voices hushed, words measured for clarity and calm. In this quiet, awareness sharpens, and each sense grows more attentive to the world that surrounds them invisibly. And so the boat, suspended between two realms, becomes a vessel of stillness and reflection. The sensation of water pressing from all directions is never loud, but it is constant, a subtle weight that fills the mind. It is felt in the chest and in the hands, resting against bulkheads, in the small shiver of nerves that travel from head to toe. Men describe it as a gentle embrace, or sometimes as a reminder of how small they are. The transition is not abrupt, but measured, allowing the body time to acclimate to the extraordinary environment. Instruments hum quietly, bathed in dim light, their presence both practical and comforting. The submarine breathes slowly with its crew, each movement harmonized with the surrounding pressure. Silence outside is mirrored by concentration within, creating a shared sense of awareness that few other environments could produce. Even in stillness, the vessel feels alive, carrying both history and expectation in its compact form. And as the minutes stretch, the crew learns to listen not only to each other, but to the pulse of the ocean itself. In this suspended space, life continues, soft and deliberate. With the sunlight gone, time is measured by rhythm rather than illumination. Shifts begin, rotations of watch and duty that structure the hours, meals, brief rests, maintenance tasks, all occur in a world without day or night. The men become attuned to subtle cues, the slight hum of machinery, the vibration of propellers, the soft groan of the hull adjusting to its new depth. Even the air seems different, carrying a dense quality that marks the separation from surface life. Breathing is deliberate, calming, almost meditative, as the crew negotiates between vigilance and patience. Small gestures, the tightening of a valve, the adjustment of a hatch, take on a sense of ceremony, performed with care and respect. Conversation, when it occurs, is quiet, meaningful, focused on essentials or fleeting comfort. Every action feels amplified in the hush, and every sound becomes part of the submarine's private language. And so the first hours below the waves flow gently, measured by attention and stillness rather than external markers. There is a curious beauty in this subdued world, one that merges awe with introspection. The vast grey outside becomes a canvas for imagination, where every sonar blip or echo suggests a hidden presence. The men become more aware of themselves in space, of their movements, their balance, their breaths. Even the hum of instruments provides a sense of reassurance, a quiet heartbeat that contrasts the silent pressures beyond. The subtle groan of steel and the occasional hiss of valves serve as reminders that the vessel is alive, and that it carries them safely through unfamiliar depths. Time stretches and folds, giving each man space to think, to reflect, and to notice the delicate interplay of forces around him. There is a meditative quality in this balance between human and machine, between courage and the calm of the unknown. And in this meditation, fear and fascination exist side by side, softening each into quiet contemplation. Life below is slow, deliberate, and strange, yet filled with a rhythm that can soothe the mind. And as the submarine drifts deeper, the quiet becomes a companion rather than a burden. The contrast between light and dark, surface and depth, never ceases to affect perception. Men glance at the dim glow of instruments, as if seeking familiar stars in the absence of the sun. Shadows lengthen and shift, creating a sense of movement without motion. Every metallic surface reflects the subdued light, turning the interior into a space both functional and subtly luminous. The air feels thicker here, carrying the scent of oil, metal, and the faint traces of meals past. The hull hums with energy, its vibrations a gentle lullaby against the eerie stillness of the ocean. Conversations are whispers, mechanical adjustments deliberate, each act amplified by the hush that surrounds them. In these early hours of the dive, the submarine itself becomes the world, and the ocean a silent partner in the voyage. Men move and breathe with intention, aware that every small gesture contributes to collective survival. And in this intimate rhythm, the first descent settles into quiet acceptance. The quiet before the depths carries with it a soft mixture of wonder and unease. Men feel the beauty of leaving the visible world behind, the elegance of a sea that moves unseen and unfelt. At the same time, there is a gentle reminder of the unknown, of the vast pressure and dark space that surround them. Yet the crew adapts, learning to move, breathe, and exist in harmony with the submarine and its environment. They find comfort in repetition, in rituals that anchor them to the familiar amid the extraordinary. The weight of water becomes a companion, pressing softly against metal and flesh alike. Even fear is muted here, transformed into attentiveness, into an awareness that is both calming and protective. And so the first moments of descent are neither rushed nor fraught, but measured and quiet. The sun disappears, the ocean holds them, and life continues in its slow, deliberate rhythm. As the submarine drifts deeper, the story carries on, leading toward the hum of human presence and endurance. The heartbeat of life inside a U-boat was measured in watches, a rhythm that gave structure to a world without sunlight. Each man knew his shift, a rotation of duties designed to keep the vessel alive and safe beneath the waves. Some watched the instruments and gauges, tracing needles with quiet focus, ensuring that depth, speed, and pressure remained balanced. Others sat at listening posts, their ears straining to catch faint vibrations in the water, translating silence into information. Periscope duties were precise and deliberate, requiring patience and calm, scanning the grey surface above for any hint of movement. The lamps overhead provided only a soft glow, casting long shadows across the narrow corridors and workspaces. Time lost its usual markers and hours blurred together, defined only by rotations, meals, and the subtle changes in the boat sep's hum. Men moved carefully, conserving energy yet remaining alert, each shift blending seamlessly into the next. Even small tasks took on a rhythm, repeated over days until they became second nature, and in this soft cadence, life below the waves found its quiet continuity. The rhythm of watches created a shared intimacy, a sense that every man's ship's presence was essential to the whole. The helmsman felt the subtle tilt of the boat beneath his hands, the vibrations traveling along the steel floor to fingertips and toes. The radio operator listened constantly, not for conversation, but for patterns in the static, the faintest indication that the ocean held someone or something nearby. Mechanics tended engines in rotating shifts, their motions deliberate, aware that fatigue could compromise safety. Even in moments of stillness, the crew remained connected by the vessel's ship's pulse, an unspoken understanding that everyone's ship's actions were intertwined. Conversations were quiet and functional, punctuated by small jokes or reassurances that passed like gentle signals through the air. Every shift carried a different texture, from the hushed night hours to the moments when lamps glowed brightest. The boat itself seemed to breathe with them, a living organism whose rhythm mirrored their own, and as one watch ended, another seamlessly took its place, carrying life forward without interruption. Time itself became measured in turns and cycles rather than sunrise and sunset. Without sunlight, the men relied on memory and routine to mark the passage of days. The lamps cast soft pools of light, illuminating tasks while leaving the surrounding corners in gentle shadow. Watches became the primary way to know when to eat, rest, or stand guard. Even the sound of footsteps along metal decks became a quiet reminder of sequence and order. The crew learned to feel time rather than see it, attuning themselves to subtle shifts in machinery, temperature, and the boat's movement through the water. Laughter and conversation were measured, small moments of relief in a world otherwise constrained by artificial light. The hum of electrical equipment marked the passage of hours, a constant companion to the rhythm of watches. Men recorded information meticulously, keeping logs that seemed to stretch into infinity, a map of invisible life beneath the waves. In this careful management, chaos was kept at bay, replaced by a quiet, hypnotic order, and so the submarine became a place where time existed softly, like a current beneath the surface. The periscope became a window not just for observation, but for maintaining a sense of orientation in a world without natural markers. Those assigned to it learned to hold their gaze patiently, scanning for motion, shapes, or changes in light. Even when nothing appeared, the act of watching brought a strange clarity, a rhythm to their senses. Each sweep became a meditation, a quiet repetition that anchored the mind to purpose. The dim light in the compartment glowed on charts and instruments, giving life to otherwise static objects. Shadows flickered across faces, revealing concentration, fatigue, and the subtle tension of responsibility. The watch passed slowly, each moment measured by breathing, heartbeat, and the gentle sway of the hull. There was no hurry, only awareness, a focused stillness that filled the confined space. And when the periscope duty ended, the transition back to the quiet interior felt seamless, as though the ocean itself allowed no interruption. Each watch became a thread in the continuous fabric of life below the surface. Even routine tasks carried a weight of subtle observation and care. Valves were checked, lines inspected, instruments adjusted, all repeated with care and precision. The mechanics of the boat demanded attention to detail, for small mistakes could ripple into larger consequences. Men learnt to move in ways that minimized noise, synchronizing steps to avoid vibration or collision. The smell of oil, metal, and damp steel accompanied every movement, a constant presence in the soft-lit corridors. Meals and brief rests punctuated the cycles, yet even these were shaped by the watch schedule. There was a strange elegance in the repetition, a pattern that grew familiar and comforting over time. Each task, no matter how small, reinforced the quiet rhythm that carried the crew through days and nights. And in these details, the men found a sense of control amidst the vast uncertainty of the ocean. Their attentiveness became both practice and meditation, shaping the passage of each hour. Sleep itself adapted to the rhythm of watches. Short stretches folded between duties and rotations. Hammocks were stacked closely, shared in shifts, the weight of proximity softened by routine. Even in rest, the boat's subtle movements, the hum of machinery, and the scent of oil accompanied dreams. Waking was gradual, a gentle return to alertness marked by the shift change or the dimming of lamps. Men learned to recognize fatigue not as weakness, but as a natural consequence of continuous immersion in the vessel's world. Small comforts, folding clothes neatly, adjusting a pillow, exchanging a whispered word, provided continuity and reassurance. Time felt both abundant and compressed, measured in cycles of work, rest, and watch, rather than in hours or minutes. In these stretches of sleep, the body and mind became quietly attuned to the hidden rhythms of the submarine. And as one watch ended and another began, the continuity of life remained unbroken. Each rotation carried the crew gently forward, deeper into the vessel's subtle cadence. Communication during watches was deliberate and minimal, each word chosen with care. Orders were given softly, questions answered succinctly, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The constant presence of others shaped a quiet awareness, a sense that every action affected the whole. Laughter, when it appeared, was soft, a ripple in the subdued atmosphere of steel and lamps. Tension never vanished entirely, but it became a background hum rather than a distraction. The men grew skilled at observing without speaking, listening without interruption, and acting with measured calm. Their senses became attuned to the faintest signals, the quietest shifts in machinery, the subtle vibrations of the hull. In this silent vigilance, patience and awareness intertwined, forming a collective consciousness that carried the boat forward. And through it all, the submarine's rhythm guided them, shaping time into soft cycles of continuity and purpose. Each watch reinforced the hidden pulse of life beneath the waves. By the end of a full cycle, the crew moved as one, their actions synchronized with the vessel Cesti's steady rhythm. Rotation after rotation, the hypnotic cadence of duties and observation shaped their perception of space and time. The lamplit corridors and soft hum of machinery became familiar, almost comforting, in the absence of sunlight. Each shift flowed into the next, creating a continuous, unbroken cycle that defined life below the surface. The routines of navigation, listening, and periscope duties became a quiet meditation, a gentle focus on the vessel and its environment. Even subtle discomforts were absorbed into this rhythm, carried along by habit and attentiveness. Men adapted to this life, finding peace in repetition and solace in shared purpose. In the soft glow of artificial light, the U-boat became a space where order and patience flourished. And in this slow, deliberate flow, the crew continued their journey, carrying forward into deeper hours and subtler shadows. Each watch became a step in the quiet, enduring heartbeat of the submarine. Food on a U-boat was more than sustenance. It was a quiet ritual, a small anchor in a constantly shifting world. Rations were carefully measured, stored in tins, barrels, and small cabinets designed to preserve them for weeks. Bread, dense and slightly dry, provided a foundation for every meal, its familiar scent giving a fleeting sense of home. Cabbage, preserved and simple, became a comforting constant, its aroma drifting through narrow corridors whenever it was cooked. Occasionally, a tin of sausage or a small treat broke the routine, offering subtle excitement to a crew used to monotony. Coffee prepared slowly and shared in modest cups held a significance beyond flavor, marking moments of rest and connection. Men learned to savor each mouthful, aware that every bite carried both nourishment and a fragment of normalcy. Even the preparation became a ritual, a deliberate sequence of opening cans, boiling water, and portioning food. The smells, textures, and warmth created a rhythm that contrasted with the silent pressures outside. And through these meals the crew found comfort and continuity in their hidden world. Eating was a communal act, though space made it intimate and careful. Men gathered around narrow tables or in cramped corners, elbows almost touching, sharing the quiet warmth of food. Conversations were soft, stories brief, often revolving around home, past meals, or small jokes that lifted spirits. The scent of cabbage boiling, of bread toasted over a small flame, mingled with the ever-present smells of oil and metal. Even the act of passing a tin became significant, an unspoken acknowledgement of trust and cooperation. There was a rhythm to these moments, a gentle cadence measured by utensils, soft laughter, and the occasional clink of a tin lid. Mealtime punctuated long hours, providing pauses that allowed minds and bodies to relax. Even briefly, men noticed small details, the color of the cabbage, the slight sweetness in the bread, the warmth of the coffee against cold fingers. Each meal became a small ceremony, reinforcing bonds and quieting the constant hum of the submarine. And as plates were cleared, the crew returned to duty, carrying with them the subtle comfort of shared sustenance. Rationing required skill, patience, and careful planning, especially on longer patrols. Men learned to stretch supplies, cutting portions thinly but enough to satisfy hunger. Cans were opened with care, their contents distributed evenly to avoid waste. Bread was sliced precisely, sometimes warmed gently over minimal heat to improve flavor. Even cabbage, when boiled or fried, was treated as a treasure, its flavor appreciated in the simplicity of survival. Occasionally fresh items could be added, but they were rare and celebrated quietly when they appeared. Water was conserved similarly, measured for drinking, cooking, and cleaning with strict care. Every meal was a balance of nutrition, comfort, and economy. A delicate rhythm the men maintained to preserve both health and morale. These routines provided a sense of order amidst the uncertainty of the ocean around them. And in this careful stewardship, food became a quiet ritual of life below the waves. The smells of cooking were subtle companions, lingering in corridors and compartments, mingling with the scent of oil, metal, and sweat. Bread warmed slowly, giving off its yeasty perfume, comforting men who had been at sea for days without fresh air. The cabbage added an earthy scent, a reminder of tradition and home, its aroma wrapping around the crew as they ate. Occasionally, the sharp tang of preserved meat entered the mix, a rare note of indulgence amid simplicity. Coffee released its bitter warmth into the air, each cup shared as a symbol of calm and continuity. These scents became markers of time, a way to differentiate 1 hour from the next in a world without sunlight. They were reminders of care, of human touch in an environment defined by metal and water. Even when the air became stale or heavy, the smell of food brought a soft focus to the present. The act of eating turned into meditation, each sensory detail anchoring men to their shared reality. And as the meals ended, the lingering smells continued to comfort, guiding them gently into their next duties. Preparation was a quiet choreography, performed with care to avoid disturbing others or wasting precious resources. Men moved with intention, passing tins, boiling water, and slicing bread in precise motions. Noise was minimized, but the sounds that did emerge, the hiss of boiling water, the click of a lid, added rhythm to the narrow space. Even the smallest act became part of a shared consciousness, a reminder of cooperation and mutual reliance. The cook's role, though often understated, carried immense importance, shaping morale as much as taste. Men respected the routine, waiting their turn, and appreciating the care given to each portion. Silence between tasks allowed for reflection, as each man felt the steady pulse of the boat and the subtle comfort of shared sustenance. Meals were more than nutrition. They were a tactile, olfactory, and emotional respite from the pressure outside. And in these small, deliberate acts, the U-boat's interior became a vessel not just of survival, but of continuity and quiet ritual. Coffee held a special place, marking moments between duties, offering warmth, aroma, and brief companionship. It was brewed carefully, in small quantities, shared among men who savored its strength and bitterness. The steam curled upward, carrying with it the scents of oil and metal, creating a complex tapestry of the submarine sap's life. Cups were passed hand to hand, a subtle gesture of care, and sipped slowly, almost ceremoniously. Conversations often flowed here, soft and measured, punctuated by quiet laughter or whispered recollections of home. Coffee became a signal for rest, a brief pause in the constant rhythm of duties, watches, and tasks. Even in moments of fatigue, the drink offered focus and a touch of warmth that lingered in the body. It reminded men of humanity, of rituals shared far from the open world above. And as the last sip was drained, the crew returned to tasks, carrying the memory of comfort into the metallic quiet, These small moments became anchors, gentle markers of continuity in the days at sea. Mealtime was also a subtle lesson in patience and gratitude. Each portion was valued, each smell noticed, and every flavor appreciated in a way impossible on land. Men learned to wait, to share, and to savor the slow rhythm of eating together in confined space. The act of washing dishes, storing tins, and organizing leftovers was not menial, but part of the pattern that maintained order and morale. Even fatigue and hunger were tempered by the ritual, which transformed necessity into quiet pleasure. The shared awareness of limited resources heightened a sense of connection, reinforcing bonds forged through routine and duty. Meals punctuated days with gentle predictability, giving rhythm and comfort to a world defined by confinement. In these simple acts, the crew exercised control over a small portion of their lives, grounding themselves amidst uncertainty. And as each meal concluded, the lingering warmth, aroma, and satisfaction eased men back into the soft cadence of submarine life. Food became both a practical and emotional sustenance, guiding them gently forward through the next hours. Weeks of patrol revealed the quiet resilience food could inspire. Even when supplies dwindled or monotony threatened, the small treasures of bread, cabbage, and canned meat offered solace. Men looked forward to meals as markers of time, moments to breathe, reflect, and connect with one another. The shared enjoyment of simple sustenance reminded them of continuity, of humanity, and of home. Conversations over coffee or shared tins created intimacy, while rituals of preparation reinforced cooperation and focus. The act of eating became a meditation in motion, a momentary retreat from engines, pressure, and the endless grey outside. Senses sharpened, noticing every aroma, texture, and sound that accompanied the ritual. And in this careful attention, meals became something sacred, quietly sustaining both body and spirit. Each plate cleared carried the echo of calm, guiding men toward the next phase of their day. And through these rhythms, life below the waves continued, soft, deliberate, and enduring. A U-boat carried more than men and machinery. It carried silence, the weight of absence that stretched for weeks and months. Letters from home were gathered carefully before departure, folded neatly and stacked in envelopes that promised connection but delivered none. Men sometimes held them, tracing names with fingertips, imagining voices and laughter long gone from their reach. The letters waited patiently in lockers unopened, carrying hope, longing, and fragments of everyday life above the waves. There was no way to know if the words would ever be read, or if the world they described would change before a sailor returned. Even the simplest line, "I hope you are well," became a silent companion, a gentle tether to another life. As the boat slipped deeper beneath the ocean, the letters remained, untouched yet profoundly present, shaping emotion in the quiet. Men spoke of home softly in hushed tones, as though the walls themselves might carry the conversation to those absent. Waiting became an invisible rhythm, measured in breaths, hours, and the hum of the submarine. And through it the crew carried the quiet weight of separation, subtle yet unrelenting. Isolation was never complete, yet it was absolute in its effect. The men shared each other, 6 presents, voices, and gestures, but nothing could replace the touch of family or the familiarity of a loved one iced smile. Days stretched long, each patrol dissolving into another, punctuated only by routine, meals, and distant thoughts. Letters, even unread, anchored those thoughts, providing glimpses of warmth in a cold and confined world. Men imagined the ordinary moments, breakfasts at home, children playing, letters being written in daylight, while they worked in narrow corridors, their eyes adjusted to dim lamps. Even the faintest scent in a letter, the paper itself became infused with memory, evoking life above that seemed almost dreamlike. The contrast between the silent present and the imagined past weighed gently, a reminder of both what was missed and what remained. Occasionally a letter would be shared aloud, read quietly to pass the time and to fold a piece of the outside world into the interior of the boat. Yet these readings were rare, and the majority of letters remained unseen, their words suspended in anticipation. And so the crew lived in a space where hope was present but deferred, a constant undercurrent beneath daily life. Men adapted to the quiet absence, finding solace in routine and small gestures. Watches, meals, and chores became anchors, filling the space that letters promised but could not occupy. Even the simple act of handling an envelope, imagining the hand that wrote it, brought a subtle comfort that eased tension. Stories from home were shared softly among comrades, fragments pieced together like mosaics, each detail cherished. The anticipation of returning to port, of finally reading each letter, shaped thought and desire in the silent hours. Streams of letters carried unspoken words and emotions, bridging the divide between confinement and the world above. Each envelope held not just ink and paper, but fragments of life that the crew longed to touch and understand. In this way, letters were vessels of both presence and absence, quietly marking the passage of time and the distance between worlds. And as days and weeks passed, the unread words became companions in the isolation, gentle reminders of life elsewhere. The men carried them forward, delicate and invisible, like whispers that travelled unseen through the boat. Some letters held urgent news, though the crew would never know until return. Births, illnesses, anniversaries, all unfolded without knowledge beneath the waves, leaving sailors suspended in a different reality. Even without specifics, the awareness that life continued outside created a soft tension, a mixture of longing and reassurance. Men imagined the voices, the laughter, the small disputes that were part of the ordinary world beyond the hull. Each imagined scene was vivid in its absence, shaping emotions as tangibly as the hum of engines or the clank of machinery. Letters became symbols representing connection and separation simultaneously, a quiet paradox in the confined space. They reminded men that life was ongoing, that the ocean held them temporarily, but could not erase the ties above. In these reflections, sailors found patience and resilience, the mental endurance necessary to survive days of silence. And as the patrol continued, the unseen words gained weight, becoming part of the internal rhythm of each man. The letters waited, as persistent and quiet as the sea itself, carrying the promise of reunion. The act of imagining responses created a private world, one in which men rehearsed greetings, reassurances, and reflections. Some spoke softly to themselves, whispering imagined replies while performing tasks in narrow corridors. Others wrote their thoughts on scraps of paper, careful to preserve privacy and order, though the envelopes would remain unopened until homecoming. The letters were mirrors reflecting hopes, regrets, and memories, even when the physical words were never read. Each imagined conversation became a meditation, a subtle negotiation between absence and anticipation. Men discovered that even imagined contact could provide a sense of closeness, a gentle balm against the intensity of confinement. They practiced patience, holding the unseen, unspoken dialogue as a quiet exercise in emotional endurance. And through this process, letters transformed into companions, delicate yet persistent, guiding thought and reflection. Time beneath the waves became measured not only by tasks or watches, but by the mental journey of letters yet unseen. And in the silent dialogue, the crew learned to navigate absence with care and quiet grace. When news from port finally arrived, the effect was subtle and profound. Letters handed out upon return became treasures, each envelope unfolding stories and emotions long imagined. Men handled them slowly, savoring the act of reading, allowing each line to bridge months of silence. The physicality of paper, ink, and handwriting became almost sacred, a tangible link to the lives they had left above. The waiting had transformed perception, making ordinary words extraordinary in the context of longing and isolation. Even letters that carried mundane news felt significant, their arrival a reminder of continuity and connection. The crew shared moments quietly, discussing news, asking questions, and filling in gaps in memory and imagination. And in these exchanges, the invisible bonds of shared patience and hope strengthened, reinforcing camaraderie. The letters had been absent but never irrelevant, shaping thought and emotion throughout the patrol. And as the submarine returned to port, the silence that had dominated life beneath the waves began to dissolve into conversation and memory. Letters also became symbols of sacrifice, the quiet cost of vanishing into a hidden world. Each envelope represented life paused, moments missed, and distance endured, gentle reminders of the price of duty. Men carried them carefully, aware of the trust placed in them by those writing, by the passage of time, and by the ocean that held them captive. Even after returning home, letters evoked memories of confinement, the rhythmic hum of the submarine, and the invisible currents of silence. They were both relief and reminder, a testament to endurance and the quiet strength required to navigate long absences. Men learned to treasure the act of reading, to slow time and to savor connection long delayed. Letters became a meditation on presence and absence, patience and anticipation, each word quietly resonating through the mind. And in this subtle reflection, the crew carried forward a deeper understanding of solitude and human connection. Time beneath the waves had been measured not only in hours, but in unread words, and through the letters, life and memory intertwined softly, gently guiding men back to the world they had long imagined. Isolation, in the end, was both challenge and teacher. The letters never read taught patience, resilience, and the depth of longing that could exist without interruption. Silence became a companion, and anticipation a steady rhythm, each guiding thought, memory, and emotion. Men found solace in routine, in comradeship, and in the quiet dialogue with unseen words. Letters reminded them that life beyond the hull was vibrant, ongoing, and patient in its own way. They carried stories of love, friendship, and daily existence, gently shaping the crew fit's internal landscape. Even absence became meaningful, its weight softened by imagination, memory, and hope. And as the submarine moved through grey waters, the unread words floated alongside the men, invisible yet persistent. Through this quiet tension, the human heart learned endurance, subtle and continuous, like the slow pulse of the vessel itself. And in the waiting, the crew discovered that even silence can carry a story worth holding. The first depth charge arrives not with sight, but with sound, a haunting signal carried through water that seems heavier than air. Sonar pings, rhythmic and precise, echo in the ears of the crew, translating the ocean into a language of imminent danger. The submarine shudders subtly at first, a gentle vibration along the steel walls, almost unnoticeable if one were not listening closely. Then it deepens, a reverberation that moves through floors and bulkheads, felt in the chest and fingertips alike. Lights flicker briefly, throwing shadows that seem alive, dancing across faces tense with awareness. Men grasp at instruments, check gauges, and move with measured precision, their training softening fear into calm action. The ocean outside, vast and silent, holds its own rhythm, indifferent to human tension, yet carrying the subtle forces of destruction. Each heartbeat seems to synchronize with the vibration, a private drumbeat echoing in the chest of every sailor. Even as the hull rocks, the men breathe deliberately, grounding themselves in the familiar motions of their duties. And through the tremors, the crew drifts in a careful, suspended attention, attuned to both danger and endurance. Time stretches strangely during the attack, seconds feeling elongated, marked by recurring echoes rather than measured watches. The sonar blips continue, each one a reminder of the vessels above, tracing their path with patience and precision. Men lean close to gauges and charts, reading depth, speed, and orientation, as if the numbers themselves might offer guidance. The vibrations grow sharper, resonating through compartments and making the air seem thicker, denser, heavier. Even conversation is minimal, confined to whispers or gestures, conserving energy and focus. The faint smell of oil and metal is carried more strongly by tension, mingling with the stale air of confined space. Every motion, from adjusting a valve to monitoring the periscope, is deliberate, measured, and synchronized with the pulse of the hull. And as the depth charges explode above, the crew feels the ocean as a living presence, indifferent, yet intimate, dangerous yet familiar. Each wave of sound and vibration becomes a rhythm in itself, dictating attention and breathing. Through this intense focus, the men navigate terror with quiet precision. The first tremor passes, leaving only faint echoes and the soft creak of metal returning to balance. The sudden stillness contrasts with the preceding chaos, highlighting the thin line between silence and sound beneath the waves. Men glance at each other briefly, acknowledging shared endurance without words, their expressions calm masks over inward tension. The hum of instruments resumes, offering reassurance, a soft heartbeat to accompany the lingering vibrations. Even the faintest movement of water against the hull seems amplified, as if the ocean itself is holding its breath. The men settle into a careful rhythm, listening, feeling, and adjusting with the practiced ease of repetition. The dim light in the compartments casts familiar shadows, grounding attention on tasks and instruments rather than fear. Each second becomes a lesson in presence, a meditation on motion, vibration, and the thin veil between safety and peril. And in this stillness, the submarine itself seems to breathe, carrying the crew gently forward into the next moments of uncertainty. The silence after the first tremor becomes as potent as the sound that preceded it. Even the smallest noises are magnified, each click, hiss, and drip carrying a subtle weight in the confined space. The men attune their senses, listening for changes in pitch, rhythm, or resonance that might signal another explosion. Hands hover near switches, ready to adjust depth or speed, though every action is deliberate and calm. The soft vibration underfoot serves as a reminder of connection to both the boat and the ocean beyond. Even shadows on the walls seem to shift, following the subtle swells of pressure and sound. Breath is slow, steady, yet conscious, filling lungs in measured intervals to steady mind and body. Each watch, each rotation, each instrument becomes a point of focus, a tether to stability amidst the uncertainty outside. And as the moments stretch, The crew feels both tension and intimacy with their environment, connected to the submarine and to one another. The hull, resilient and familiar, carries them through the pulse of threat, and through every tremor the rhythm of survival becomes quietly hypnotic. Depth charges create waves felt rather than seen, subtle pulses transmitted through water that make the boat itself a sensitive instrument. The men sense direction, force, and proximity, all translated through steel, water, and intuition. Instruments are monitored not with urgency, but with steady awareness, each reading a quiet reassurance against fear. Even the smell of heated metal, of oil, and of recycled air carries a new intensity, grounding attention in physical reality. Men move slowly, cautiously, ensuring balance, adjusting valves, and attending to delicate machinery. The repetition of tasks provides focus, turning potential panic into calm efficiency. Shadows play across faces and walls, flickering with each vibration, a soft interplay of light and movement. Breathing becomes a rhythm, synchronized with the pulse of the boat, deliberate and calming. And as the immediate threat subsides, tension lingers quietly, a gentle hum beneath measured activity. In this balance of danger and order, the crew navigates the unseen currents of the ocean. Each explosion teaches the men subtle lessons about rhythm, timing, and patience. The ocean becomes a language communicated through vibration, pressure, and sound, demanding attention and respect. Even fear is translated into focus, guiding hands, eyes, and minds with disciplined calm. The faint hum of instruments, the soft clank of machinery, the muted footfalls of comrades, all contribute to an orchestrated awareness. Every pulse of the hull carries information, a message decoded by experience and instinct. Conversations remain subdued, gestures minimal, actions deliberate, as though movement itself might provoke another echo. And in this quiet vigilance, men learn to inhabit tension without letting it dominate, to exist fully in the present. Each depth charge becomes both teacher and measure, shaping the collective consciousness of the crew. Even after the immediate danger, the memory of sound and vibration lingers softly, a quiet imprint on the mind. And through these lessons, the submarine carries its human occupants onward into deeper understanding and resilience. The aftermath of the first attack leaves a delicate balance between relief and lingering awareness. The hum of normal machinery resumes, yet every sound is now subtly charged with possibility. Men exchange soft words of reassurance, nods and glances, acknowledging shared endurance without breaking concentration. The faint creak of metal becomes familiar again, the dim glow of lamps grounding attention in routine. Breathing settles, though the body remains alert to vibrations, pressure changes, and movement. Even the scent of oil and metal, once comforting, takes on a slightly sharper clarity, heightened by recent stress. Instruments are double-checked, positions confirmed, routines maintained with calm deliberation. And as the crew moves forward, the ocean seems both friend and adversary, its presence undeniable, intimate, and immense. Time resumes its quiet rhythm, measured by watches and tasks, yet shadowed by memory. Each man carries the tension softly, the echo of the first encounter lingering beneath composed action. Through the following hours, the crew learns the subtle art of coexistence with threat. Each sonar ping, each distant vibration becomes part of a quiet awareness integrated into the flow of routine. Men anticipate and react without haste, their senses honed by repetition and careful attention. Even in moments of stillness, the experience of sound and pressure leaves a residue, shaping thought and perception. Conversations remain low, movements measured, the whole carrying every pulse of attention like a soft drumbeat. The dim lighting continues to cast shadows that anchor perception and focus. Tasks are performed with precision, rituals repeated to maintain order and calm. And in this practice, the crew develops a subtle meditation on presence, movement, and endurance. The first depth charge becomes both memory and guide, a gentle reminder of the thin line between safety and uncertainty. And as the submarine drifts through grey waters, the rhythm of alertness and quiet carries them softly forward into hours of patient vigilance. The interior of the submarine transforms under red lights, casting a dim, surreal glow over every corridor, bulkhead, and instrument. Shadows stretch and bend across the walls, soft yet insistent, creating a sense of otherworldly calm fused with quiet alertness. Hushed voices navigate the narrow spaces, conversations reduced to whispers, so that sound carries neither far nor loudly. Every movement is deliberate, a choreography of caution and precision, reinforced by the dim glow that softens the edges of reality. Instruments take on an almost sacred appearance, the needles and dials illuminated as if they were guardians of life beneath the waves. The scent of metal, oil, and recycled air mingles with the faint warmth of lamps, grounding men in the tactile world of the vessel. Even breathing becomes part of the ritual, slowed and measured, in synchrony with careful movement and muted observation. Men exchange brief glances, each glance carrying meaning, conveying instruction, reassurance, or awareness, without the need for words. The red light preserves both secrecy and serenity, a delicate balance of tension and calm. And within this glow, the submarine exists as a suspended world, separate yet intimately connected to the ocean outside. Commands are whispered in soft cadences, carried along the narrow corridors like secret currents. Each instruction is precise, deliberate, and measured, shaping the movement of men and machinery alike. The rhythm of orders becomes a subtle pulse, anchoring the crew to purpose and maintaining cohesion in an environment defined by shadow. Even the faintest noise, the click of a hatch, the hiss of steam, the murmur of water against steel, is amplified by attentiveness. Men respond with care, performing tasks as if each movement were part of an unspoken ceremony. The glow of red light turns simple gestures into almost sacred acts, marking precision and attention as rites of survival. Shadows shift across faces, revealing concentration, fatigue, and the quiet tension of responsibility. Every repetition of a task reinforces calm focus, embedding rhythm into the confined, luminous space. And as the hours stretch, the red glow sustains both vigilance and quiet intimacy, a cocoon of measured energy. Within this world, the crew moves as one, tethered to both light and silence. The red lamps affect perception, softening the contrast of edges and blurring boundaries within the submarine. Corridors appear longer, shadows deeper, and corners more secretive, enhancing both alertness and reflection. Men move through these spaces with heightened awareness, each footfall and gesture carrying weight in a world where sound travels swiftly. Even routine inspections of instruments or machinery take on heightened significance, a ritual of attention and survival. Whispered exchanges convey urgency, yet maintain the soft cadence that preserves composure. The combination of dim light, hushed tones, and confined space cultivates a sense of ceremony, an unspoken understanding of shared purpose. The hum of the engines becomes a steady background heartbeat, anchoring awareness amidst the quiet tension. Men sense one another, reading posture and motion, the red light illuminating meaning beyond words. Even small adjustments, tightening a valve, checking a gauge, carry the gravity of continuity and precision. And through this subdued luminosity, the submarine maintains its fragile balance between control and uncertainty. The glow of red light extends to the very instruments that guide life below the waves. Dials, needles, and charts take on a soft luminescence, each a beacon of information that demands attention and care. Hand trace measurements carefully, adjusting depth, speed, or orientation with quiet assurance. Even the hum of electricity becomes meditative, a subtle pulse against which all motion is measured. Whispered communication accompanies every action, reinforcing order and safety in the vessel's sep's confined, luminous spaces. Shadows play upon walls and ceilings, emphasizing the geometry of the submarine, the narrow passages, and the layered decks. Each creak or vibration is noted, interpreted, and folded into awareness, shaping perception like a gentle wave. Men become attuned to the invisible rhythms of the hull, the pulse of the engines, and the subtle cues of one another. And as the red glow bathes the submarine, even the simplest tasks become meditative acts of precision. In this quiet illumination, the world outside feels both distant and ever-present, a shadowed horizon beyond the steel. Sleep and rest are tempered by the glow, a delicate interplay between fatigue and attentiveness. Hammocks sway gently under dim red light, allowing eyes to close while remaining conscious of subtle vibrations. The faint hum of machinery provides a soft rhythm, guiding breathing and awareness without intrusion. Even short naps are part of the ritual, restoring energy while maintaining connection to duty. Men awaken gradually, orienting themselves to both glow and movement, the light preserving awareness without urgency. Whispered instructions and gentle taps signal change of watch or adjustment of position, maintaining continuity of care. The air carries faint scents of oil, metal, and the day sips meals, grounding perception in physical reality. Time becomes fluid, measured less by hours and more by cycles of light, shadow, and attention. And as one watch ends and another begins, the red illumination guides movement, maintaining calm focus and quiet rhythm. In this way, rest and vigilance coexist, linked by the soft pulse of luminous routine. Even the smallest gestures acquire heightened meaning under the red lamps. A hand passed along a gauge, a gentle adjustment of machinery, a whispered query, all are amplified in significance by the dim light. Men read posture, breath, and motion. With precision, the glow revealing subtle shifts in concentration and alertness. The routine of tasks transforms into a meditative cadence, each act a reaffirmation of skill, attention, and shared purpose. Shadows move slowly along walls, sometimes merging, sometimes separating, echoing the delicate balance of proximity and individuality within the crew. The hum of the hull and engines merges with whispered instructions to create an almost musical rhythm of life below the waves. Even the recycled air carries meaning, mixed with faint odors of oil, metal, and preserved food, reminding men of both the vessel's ship's life and their own. And as the hours pass under red light, the submarine becomes a temple of quiet focus, a place where both vigilance and calm are preserved. Through this ritualized space, the crew navigates the tension between safety and exposure with quiet grace, and the red light, persistent yet gentle, guides them deeper into both duty and reflection. Communication flows with deliberate softness, each word weighted with purpose. Men speak only as necessary, conserving sound and attention, while preserving calm. Instructions are absorbed in the hush, executed with care, and confirmed with gestures, nods, or brief whispers. Even warnings travel softly, carried along a network of awareness, heightened by shared focus and the subdued glow. The vessel hums in response, every mechanism attentive, every vibration noted, reinforcing connection to both crew and environment. The intimacy of low-light operation fosters trust, requiring the men to depend on instinct, observation, and experience. Shadows lengthen, merge, and shift as the submarine continues its slow, deliberate movements through water. Every adjustment, every signal becomes a meditation on continuity and presence. And through this quiet choreography, the crew navigates not just the submarine, but their own awareness, tethered to both light and silence. In this glow, the world feels suspended, deliberate, and strangely expansive despite confinement. By the end of long watches under red light, the crew has settled into a rhythm of concentration and calm. Each man knows the boundaries of his space, the pulse of machinery, and the signals that move silently between comrades. The vessel itself seems to breathe with them, a soft, steady companion beneath the weight of the ocean. Shadows, sound, and hum form a tapestry of presence that is both protective and hypnotic. Even the faintest movements carry significance, reinforcing mindfulness and shared responsibility. The dim light softens edges, creating a sense of distance while maintaining connection to tasks and instruments. Whispered words, measured actions, and deliberate observation combine into a quiet meditation on life and survival. And as the watch passes, the men carry both attention and serenity, a delicate balance cultivated in the luminous hush. The submarine exists as a world apart, its rhythm, shadows, and red glow guiding the crew softly onward. And in this soft illumination, the human and mechanical pulse converge into a singular hypnotic cadence. Sleep on a U-boat was a fragile luxury, borrowed in stolen intervals between watches and tasks. Bunks were narrow and stacked, sometimes situated above the long cylindrical forms of torpedoes, creating an intimate proximity to both danger and necessity. Hammocks swayed gently, tied to rails or bulkheads, adjusting to the subtle pulse of engines and movement of water outside. Even in rest, men adapted to vibration, noise, and the constant hum of machinery, learning to let body and mind coexist with the vessel's set rhythm. Exhaustion softened the edges of awareness, allowing dreams to surface, strange and fragmentary, mixing home, ocean, and the metallic intimacy of the submarine. The air was warm and thick, carrying faint odors of oil, sweat, and preserved meals, embedding the sense of the environment deep in memory. Men slept lightly, aware of their comrades, instruments, and the subtle shifts of the hull, yet surrendering enough to drift. Every sigh, creak, or clank was absorbed unconsciously, incorporated into the background of rest. Even the presence of torpedoes, silent and dormant, became part of the subconscious landscape, strangely reassuring in their order and readiness. And through these brief respites, the crew gathered strength for hours yet to come, carrying both awareness and calm forward. In the engine room, sleep took on a different texture, enveloped in heat, vibration, and the soft hum of running machinery. Men curled on narrow mats or leaned against steel surfaces, letting warmth and motion lull muscles into temporary release. Exhaustion was profound here, the body adapting to constant sensory input, filtering sound and vibration into a background rhythm that almost mimicked the heart. Dreams were often vivid, a mix of movement, shadow, and faint echoes of duty, reflecting both fatigue and immersion in the submarine's pulse. Even brief moments of rest required trust in colleagues, each man knowing others were alert nearby, monitoring machinery and maintaining safety. The smell of lubricants, heated metal, and faint food mingled in the air, creating a distinct sense of place even while consciousness waned. Hands and feet occasionally twitched, responding to subconscious awareness, small adjustments made without deliberate thought. The warm, dim, and humming environment transformed into a cradle, strange yet protective, as the body synchronized with the vessel ship's constant motion. And when a shift ended, men rose slowly, carrying the soft residue of sleep into the renewed rhythm of work. In this way, even the most confined heated spaces became temporary havens of rest and recovery. Bunks above torpedoes offered a different intimacy, where proximity to both danger and comrades shaped rest. Men slept close together, sharing warmth and space, learning to move without disturbing others or equipment. The metallic scent of nearby machinery and torpedoes became a familiar marker, embedding security into the subconscious. Each bunk absorbed the subtle movements of the boat, translating vibration and pressure into a lullaby of motion. Even restless sleep carried awareness, the mind interpreting every creak, shudder, or hiss without panic. Dreams wove together fragments of home duty and the strange glowing corridors of the submarine, creating a unique interior world. The body adjusted, muscles relaxing while remaining ready, consciousness slipping in and out of attention. Men occasionally shifted, stretching or repositioning with careful consideration for others and for space. Through these hours, sleep became a delicate negotiation, a balance of comfort, awareness, and necessity. And as the night passed, men awoke in measured increments, carrying the soft residue of rest forward into another cycle. Hammocks created a gentle sway, a motion that echoed the undulations of the sea outside. Tied to bulkheads, they allowed small movements, the body adjusting imperceptibly to every tremor of engines and water. Sleep here was lighter, more fluid, the mind floating between awareness and dream, guided by motion and repetition. Even in slumber, senses remained attuned, detecting pressure changes, subtle vibrations, or distant creaks. The warmth of the confined air softened the stark metallic edges, creating a cocoon in which the body could release tension. Dreams were often surreal, blending familiar images from land with the muted, constant rhythm of the vessel. The smell of oil, metal, and body warmth created a sensory anchor, a comforting presence throughout the night. Men stirred occasionally, repositioning with care, maintaining equilibrium for themselves and the hammocks around them, and through this gentle oscillation, the act of sleeping became a meditation on rhythm, presence, and adaptation. Sleep among hammocks carried both rest and awareness, bridging the waking and dreaming world seamlessly. Even amid confined bunks, torpedoes, and hammocks, the body found small adaptations, subtle mechanisms to cope with constant vibration. Muscles learned to absorb tremors, joints adjusted to slanted surfaces, and breathing synchronized with motion. The mind, too, learned a quiet vigilance, permitting rest while remaining sensitive to cues of the environment. Dreams became a patchwork of ocean, steel, and fleeting memories, vivid yet soft, reflecting the intensity of life below the waves. The warm, humid air carried both comfort and awareness, embedding itself in memory alongside sound and touch. Gentle murmurs, faint footsteps, and rhythmic hissing of valves became part of the lullaby, framing rest in continuity with the vessel. Even when sleep was shallow, the body and mind remained nourished, strengthened for the watches and routines ahead. And when waking occurred, The residue of rest carried forward, softening the edges of fatigue and tension. Sleep became not just restoration but integration, a subtle weaving of self into the pulse of the submarine. Through these hours the crew adapted, quietly resilient, moving gently between alertness and repose. The pattern of sleep shifted according to duty, creating a rhythm unique to life on the submarine. Watches dictated periods of wakefulness, and rest adjusted accordingly, sometimes stolen in fragments, sometimes embraced in longer stretches. Men learned to sleep in increments, trusting the rotations and their comrades' sit vigilance. Even the briefest rest was purposeful, a replenishment of both body and mind. The subtle motion of the boat became a guide, a metronome for relaxation, a pulse to synchronize with. Shadows danced faintly in the dim light, grounding perception even during rest. The smell of oil, metal, and recycled air formed a comforting constant, linking each nap to the vessel's interior world. Dreams softened with familiarity, a weaving of memory, expectation, and presence in the confined space. And as each watch ended, the rhythm of sleep returned naturally, blending seamlessly with movement, sound, and duty. Sleep, in all its forms, became a gentle cadence, anchoring life below the waves. Even brief moments of sleep carried profound psychological relief, a gentle counterpoint to tension and vigilance. In bunks, hammocks, or engine rooms, the body found subtle ways to rest while remaining sensitive to the environment. Awareness persisted but softened, allowing imagination and dreams to drift freely without losing connection to reality. Men carried images of home, fragments of conversation, and memories of past days into rest, enriching the landscape of sleep. The surrounding sounds, hum of machinery, drip of condensation, distant creaks, became companions rather than threats, part of the soft background of repose. Even when dreams were vivid or strange, they remained enveloped in the gentle pulse of the boat. The warmth of close quarters, the pressure of blankets, the scent of metal and oil, combined into a tactile memory of safety and familiarity. And when the sleep ended, men awoke slowly, carrying the delicate residue of rest forward into alertness. Sleep became both restoration and reflection, a bridge connecting hours of labor to moments of calm. And through it the human body and mind learned to move with the pulse of the submarine, softly, steadily, and enduringly. Over weeks and months, sleep became a shared rhythm, quietly binding the crew together. The familiarity of hammocks, torpedo-adjacent bunks, and engine room mats created a shared intimacy, a collective adaptation to the vessel's sep's pulse. Men learned not only to sleep, but to rest together, to adjust to one another, ESP's presence, to flow with collective necessity. Even the most subtle sounds, movements or shifts were noted unconsciously, forming a network of awareness beneath the surface. Dreams intertwined, imagination softened by the weight and warmth of close quarters, creating a subtle continuity between individual and collective rest. Sleep became a meditation on rhythm, presence, and endurance, a quiet discipline essential to life below the waves. Men emerged from rest with a soft alertness, their bodies and minds restored yet intimately attuned to the environment. And through these cycles, sleep carried both rejuvenation and resilience, a gentle anchor in the vessel's constant motion. Life beneath the waves continued, measured in watches, tasks, and sleep. And through it all, the pulse of rest moved softly, steadily, and persistently, like the gentle beat of the ocean itself. For long hours, the submarine drifted beneath a quiet sea, motion slow and deliberate, as if the vessel were a ghost passing through an invisible world. Instruments hummed softly, charts lay open, and dials crept forward in measured, steady motion. Men sat in corners or leaned against bulkheads, gazing at gauges or tracing the contours of the hull with idle fingers. The faint vibration of engines persisted, a subtle heartbeat beneath the pervasive stillness, guiding breathing and thought alike. Outside, water stretched endlessly, a dark expanse, with no sound to betray its depth or distance. Even whispers were rare, contained, respectful of the quiet that surrounded every person and every machine. The recycled air carried hints of oil, metal, and faint remnants of meals, comforting markers in the monotony. Eyes adjusted to dim light scanning instruments and shadows in equal measure, both purposeful and absent-minded. Time seemed to stretch, measured in waves, dials, and gentle hums, neither short nor long, simply continuous, and within this quiet the crew found themselves suspended in both presence and reflection, drifting with the ocean's calm. The monotony of patrol revealed subtle patterns, tiny shifts in the submarine's rhythm and the water outside. Each creak, drip, and hum became meaningful, signaling changes that might otherwise go unnoticed. Men learned to read these whispers, tracing minute variations in vibration or pressure with quiet attention. Even the dim glow of lamps became a companion, illuminating tasks while softening edges and shadows. Silence itself was a teacher, instructing patience and focus, showing how stillness could sharpen awareness. Thoughts drifted slowly, memories of home, anticipation of future events, and reflections on past experiences weaving through the mind. Meals passed quietly, shared in subdued conversation, each bite part of a rhythm rather than urgency. The vessel moved steadily, buoyant and deliberate, carrying men through invisible currents, unhurried and measured. And in these hours the patience of the ocean became a mirror, guiding the human heart toward a gentle endurance. Time folded into itself a meditation on persistence beneath the waves. The men grew accustomed to waiting, to watching, to listening for nothing, yet perceiving everything. The hum of machinery, the faint hiss of valves, the occasional distant vibration were amplified in attention, even when no event occurred. Eyes drifted toward portholes, instruments, or the narrow corridors, scanning without urgency, settling in their own rhythm. The darkness outside was complete, vast, and indifferent, yet strangely reassuring in its constancy. Even conversation became sparse, measured, almost ceremonial in its economy, preserving energy and focus. Each breath, each movement became deliberate, practiced, a soft echo of habit and awareness. The monotony was punctuated only by minor tasks, adjusting a gauge, checking a valve, tracing a chart line with quiet precision. And in these small repeated gestures, the crew preserved both vigilance and calm. Time itself seemed to merge with the slow pulse of the vessel, each moment carrying the weight of presence without demand, and through the hush of waiting, the men learned to inhabit silence as fully as motion. Even leisure followed the rhythm of monotony, soft and reflective rather than urgent. Men might read, write, or trace notes, the action slowed and careful, almost contemplative. Words written on paper seemed amplified in meaning, carrying significance in the stillness of the submarine. Conversations, when they occurred, were quiet and deliberate, voices low and measured to preserve calm and awareness. The scent of the boat, oil, metal, sweat, and the faint residue of meals remained a constant, grounding the mind in the tangible world. Shadows shifted subtly with the dim glow of lamps, providing markers of time and orientation without urgency. Even thoughts unfolded slowly, drifting in patterns shaped by repetition, solitude, and the rhythm of the vessel. Men became attuned to subtle variations in the hum of engines, the gentle creak of steel, the resonance of water against the hull. And in this prolonged quiet, focus and reflection merged, forming a soft meditation on presence and endurance. The ocean outside held its secrets patiently, offering its calm as both challenge and companion. Sleep, too, followed the rhythm of stillness, light and fragmented yet restorative. Hammocks swayed gently, bunks absorbed subtle vibration, and bodies adjusted unconsciously to the vessel's sep's pulse. Dreams drifted slowly, merging memory, imagination, and the faint hum of the submarine, echoing the external monotony in internal rhythm. Even in moments of slumber, awareness remained a quiet undercurrent, ready to respond should the vessel shift or signal arise. The smell of metal, oil, and confined warmth became part of the lullaby, marking both presence and safety. Gentle nudges, soft movements, or shifting weight were integrated seamlessly, unremarked upon yet consciously noted. Sleep reinforced patience, embedding resilience into the body, while the mind floated freely through shadow and sound. Even brief rests carried significance, the quiet of the ocean reflected in subtle rhythms of breath and thought. And when awakenings occurred, men rose slowly, carrying the soft residue of repose into another period of quiet observation. The continuity of vigilance and rest became a gentle meditation, measured in moments of sound, shadow, and breath. Men often drifted between observation and introspection, their minds tracing invisible patterns beneath the surface. Instruments became points of meditation, dials and needles moving slowly in a rhythm that matched the pulse of awareness. Outside, darkness and water held infinite depth, unbroken and vast, framing each gesture and glance within a world of patient scale. Even the hum of machinery was absorbed into thought, a soft thread linking consciousness to the steel body of the submarine. The monotony encouraged reflection, fostering patience and quiet endurance, a mental stillness that mirrored the environment. Conversations were brief and deliberate, sharing small insights or observations without breaking the gentle flow of attention. The repetitive patterns of movement, task, and observation became soothing, almost hypnotic, integrating mind and body with vessel and ocean. And through this slow, deliberate presence, the crew discovered a subtle rhythm in waiting, a meditation on continuity beneath the waves. Silence was no longer empty but alive, full of detail, subtle instruction, and awareness. And in that quiet, the men learned the depth of patience and the persistence of calm. The passage of hours and days became measured by subtle markers rather than dramatic events. The sway of the hull, the hum of engines, the faint glow of instruments, and the repetition of routine created temporal landmarks. Even monotony became meaningful, a rhythm to inhabit, observe, and respond to with careful attention. Men attuned themselves to these quiet cues, reading the pulse of the vessel and the ocean as one reads a soft language. Thoughts drifted gently, mingling memory, imagination, and the slow passage of time in the dimly lit corridors. The body relaxed into habitual motions, the mind absorbing quiet reflection, and the crew moved as a cohesive rhythm without haste. Even small tasks, meals, cleaning, or adjustments, took on a meditative quality, each action deliberate, purposeful, and contained. And as the submarine drifted, ghost-like, beneath vast silence, awareness and presence became the primary companion of the crew. Time existed, but only as soft pulse and measured breath, indefinite, yet continuous. And within this persistent quiet, the men found calm, resilience, and a gentle surrender to the rhythm of the ocean. In the endless stretches of calm, the ocean became both companion and mirror. Its silence allowed observation, introspection, and patient endurance to flourish without distraction. The vessel seemed to float between dimensions, neither above nor below, caught in a slow, invisible current that measured both distance and time. Men attuned to vibration, light, and sound, noticing the faintest changes in the hull or instruments, blending awareness with meditation. Shadows and dim lights became soft markers of orientation, rhythm and passage, both grounding and soothing. Even monotony was meaningful, a quiet teacher of patience and attention, shaping consciousness in subtle ways. Breath, movement, and sound aligned into a gentle cadence, echoing the pulse of the submarine and the infinite ocean beyond. And through these long hours, the men learned to exist fully within the vessel, aware yet relaxed, attentive yet calm. Time dissolved into continuity, a soft meditation on endurance beneath the waves. And in this ocean's silence, the crew discovered that quiet itself can hold depth, presence, and a gentle, enduring rhythm. The heart of the submarine was its machinery, a complex network of diesel engines, batteries, pumps, and valves, each demanding constant attention. Men moved through narrow engine rooms, wiping sweat from foreheads and tracing gauges with practiced fingers. The air was thick, warm, and tinged with the scent of oil, metal, and heat, clinging to skin and clothing alike. Even the faintest vibration of the hull was magnified, a reminder of the boat's ship's pulse and fragility beneath the waves. Every creak, hiss, or drip carried meaning, signaling both normal operation and subtle warning. Tasks were methodical, repeated with quiet precision, each adjustment a quiet ritual of survival. Hands were often blackened, muscles tense and flexible, learning to adapt to confined space and constant exertion. The hum of machinery created a soft, persistent rhythm, guiding motion, awareness, and breath. Men shared glances, nods, or brief murmurs, coordinating effort without breaking the soft cadence of work. And through this labor, the submarine remained alive, a vessel of both metal and human endurance, quietly thriving beneath the sea. The diesel engines radiated heat, their vibrations resonating through bulkheads and floors, embedding into the skin and bone. Men leaned close to gauges, valves, and fittings, listening for subtle shifts, adjusting pressure or flow with gentle insistence. Sweat pooled along necks and backs, soaked clothing clinging to movement, yet bodies adapted, muscles moving fluidly in the heat. The metallic scent of machinery and oil became a grounding marker, connecting attention to the vessel itself. Even routine maintenance required mindfulness. For every tightening of a valve or inspection of a pump carried weight in potential consequence. The soft hum of engines blended with dripping condensation, slow vibrations, and faint clicks of moving parts, creating a low, constant chorus. Hands became deft and observant, learning to balance force and delicacy in equal measure. Men moved in coordinated, almost silent choreography, aware of space, instruments, and one another. And through each careful adjustment, the crew reinforced both security and continuity, sustaining life in a confined, mechanical world. The engine room became a living rhythm of heat, effort, and quiet resilience. Battery compartments required their own attention, an interplay of care, concentration, and endurance. Men checked voltage, inspected connections, and monitored temperature, aware that errors could ripple outward with consequence. The scent of sulfur, metal, and damp air mingled with oil and sweat, forming a constant sensory backdrop. Hands traced thick cables, adjusting clamps, wiping corrosion, and ensuring stability with measured diligence. Each soft hum, vibration, or slight hiss was interpreted, requiring both skill and patient awareness. Muscles flexed and released continuously, bodies attuned to movement and pressure, adapting unconsciously to confined, hot, and noisy spaces. Even minor adjustments became meditative, a gentle repetition of action that sustained both the vessel and the mind. Men exchanged quiet instructions, brief gestures, or nods, maintaining awareness while preserving calm focus. And in the quiet rhythm of batteries humming and valves opening, the boatship's pulse was reinforced, a steady, living presence beneath the waves. Through meticulous attention, machinery and men merged into a single, enduring rhythm of survival. Pumps and valves demanded continual care, their soft clicks and hisses forming a language of maintenance and awareness. Men moved carefully among the pipes, measuring pressure, noting subtle differences, and adjusting flow with precision. The heat radiated outward, mingling with sweat, oil, and the faint scent of rubber and metal. Even minor leaks were noted, quietly corrected, their detection a skill honed through repetition and attention. The humming of machinery blended with the slow vibration of the hull, forming a soft, continuous rhythm beneath which men moved almost instinctively. Shadows shifted under dim lamps, illuminating tools, gauges, and hands with quiet consistency. Men shared the space with a blend of awareness, respect, and calm, moving in coordination, as if choreographed by the vessel itself. Each rotation of a valve or inspection of a pump was deliberate, a soft exercise in endurance and focus. And in this constant tending, the submarine remained alive, balanced between human care and mechanical precision. Life in these compartments was a quiet meditation on effort, patience, and the subtle language of machinery. The work was physically demanding, muscles flexing, gripping, and pushing, yet the crew adapted to the strain over time. Sweat dripped onto metal floors and tool surfaces, leaving traces that marked effort and attention. Even in these confined spaces, movement became fluid, measured, and almost rhythmic, guided by vibration, heat, and the pulse of engines. Sounds carried differently here, each hiss, drip, and vibration amplified through steel, requiring attentive interpretation. Tasks repeated, yet each carried consequence, each adjustment a quiet dialogue between human and machine. Men wiped oil from hands, adjusted belts, and checked gauges, aware that the smallest error could ripple outward. The smell of heated metal and diesel oil became intertwined with perception, embedding attention into senses as much as thought. Shadows and dim light provided orientation, contrast, and a gentle framing of space and motion. And in these moments of concentrated labor, the men became extensions of the vessel, their rhythm inseparable from the pulse of machinery. Maintenance was both survival and meditation, a soft, ongoing conversation with the life of the submarine. Even the softest sounds of creaking metal or a leaking valve could command immediate attention, sharpening awareness without urgency. Men moved carefully, eyes trained to interpret signals from instruments, steel, and ambient vibration. Sweat-soaked clothing clung to skin as muscles adapted, learning to balance effort with sensitivity. Each turn of a wrench, adjustment of a pump, or inspection of a gauge was executed with soft deliberation, a ritual of precision and endurance, The warmth, noise, and motion merged, creating a tactile awareness that guided action without conscious thought. Shadows shifted and pulled under lamps, highlighting space, distance, and tool placement for the careful hands at work. Coordination and silent communication threaded through the crew, each movement anticipated, each action integrated into the vessel, ship's quiet rhythm. And in this steady attention, the submarine remained alive, maintained, and balanced beneath the weight of water. Through labor, heat, and persistence, machinery and human effort fused into a continuous gentle pulse of survival. And in the glow of effort, men carried both vigilance and quiet calm forward. Men adapted to discomfort as an intrinsic part of routine, shaping bodies and minds to tolerate heat, noise, and vibration. Fatigue was measured, absorbed into motion and repetition rather than breaking rhythm, and attention persisted despite strain. Even the smell of metal, oil, and sweat became a subtle companion, marking presence and continuity of labor. Hands moved almost instinctively, performing repeated motions with quiet precision, guided by memory and awareness. Each creak of machinery or hiss of valve was noted, interpreted, and responded to without haste or alarm. The dim light, softened edges, and shadows, emphasizing form and movement while preserving calm focus. Men relied on observation, subtle gestures, and shared experience to maintain cohesion and safety. And as hours passed, labor became meditation, effort harmonizing with motion, sound, and purpose. Machinery and men merged into a single rhythm of endurance, sustaining life and progress in silence. The submarine pulsed softly with work, heat, and awareness, a living entity maintained by quiet vigilance. In the engine room, battery compartments, and pipe-laden corridors, the vessel came alive through human care. Each task, from tightening a bolt to monitoring a gauge, was part of a larger rhythm that sustained the boat beneath the waves. Sweat, oil, heat, and vibration became markers of presence, endurance, and attention. The soft hum of machinery provided a persistent pulse, guiding both thought and motion in quiet, hypnotic rhythm. Shadows, light, and sound framed each action, creating a steady cadence of observation, care, and adjustment. Even minor gestures carried meaning, subtle signals of awareness, skill, and vigilance, woven into the vessel's sep's pulse. The crew moved in quiet choreography, a blend of instinct, experience, and patient observation, preserving balance without haste. And as the submarine continued its journey through water, heat, and effort, machinery and men existed as one, a meditation on endurance and subtle rhythm. Life below the waves was built on sweat, sound, and attention, quietly sustaining both vessel and crew. And through this ongoing care, the pulse of survival remained constant, steady, and hypnotically persistent. The submarine carried its own invisible atmosphere, a mixture of sweat, oil, damp clothing, and the faint tang of metal that clung to every surface. Air moved slowly through corridors, absorbing and blending odors, softening them into a constant presence that became almost unnoticed over time. Men adapted instinctively, learning to navigate the confined world without conscious reaction to its pungent details. Hygiene was measured in sponge baths, small wipes, and the careful folding of damp clothing to minimize discomfort. Even the scent of preserved food and faint smoke from cooking mixed into this ecosystem, forming a layered memory of presence and effort. Bodies learned to tolerate warmth, moisture, and the accumulation of odor, adjusting naturally without conscious thought. The smell of steel and oil became markers of space, guiding hands, eyes, and movement in subtle ways. Every inhale carried history, effort, and intimacy, connecting the men to both vessel and each other. Awareness shifted, the environment becoming simultaneously oppressive and strangely comforting, a persistent companion beneath the waves. And within this shared atmosphere, life moved quietly, adapted, and endured. Clothes grew damp quickly, clinging to skin with faint traces of perspiration, oil, and the vessel's scent. Even brief periods of dryness required care, folding and airing garments carefully in the narrow corridors. The constant warmth and recycled air encouraged lingering moisture, and the crew learned to accept it as part of life below the surface. Odors layered together over time, a complex map of activity, presence, and labor that became almost invisible to those immersed in it. Hands and faces carried subtle traces, gentle reminders of effort and routine, a tactile memory of the day sup's work. Hygiene rituals were modest yet purposeful, small gestures that maintained comfort and morale without breaking the rhythm of duty. Even meals, tools, and sleeping spaces absorbed and released subtle traces of presence, contributing to the ecosystem of scent. The human body adapted, skin and senses attuning to the persistent atmosphere, filtering and integrating experience. And in this constant olfactory landscape, men moved, worked, and rested without conscious disturbance, carrying adaptation as a quiet strength. Life became a rhythm of awareness, tolerance, and quiet endurance beneath the waves. The smell of the submarine was never static. It shifted with activity, meals, engine hum, and human presence. Cooking added warmth and tang, mixing with the ever-present metallic scent of hull and machinery. Sweat and damp clothing layered over these aromas, forming a soft, dense, and continuous environment. Even sponge washes altered the composition subtly, providing temporary relief, a gentle reshaping of the invisible atmosphere. Men became adept at distinguishing layers, noticing changes without alarm, integrating them into awareness without distraction. The vessel itself absorbed and held these scents, carrying the presence of the crew and machinery alike through every compartment. Shadows and dim light framed activity, movement, and care, reinforcing presence while softening awareness of odor. And through this persistent combination of smell and environment, the men learned subtle patience, tolerance, and quiet resilience. Adaptation became instinctive, a rhythm of acceptance and attention carried forward with every breath. Life persisted softly, uninterrupted, and measured in layered aroma and gentle endurance. Even the most private rituals became subdued exercises in adaptation. Sponge baths were taken with care, preserving warmth while cleansing skin, leaving only traces behind. Clothes stacked or hung where space allowed, slowly dried in the warm corridors, carrying a faint memory of body and labor. The smell of metal, oil, and human presence persisted, embedded in every surface, every tool, every corner of the vessel. Men learned to recognize shifts, subtle changes in scent that marked activity, presence, or fatigue. Awareness became a gentle layer over routine, a soft integration of environment and body without intrusion or stress. Even conversation, laughter, and shared stories carried faint aromatic traces, blending seamlessly into the background of attention. And as days passed, the persistent combination of odor and activity became invisible yet grounding, a shared marker of existence below the waves. Presence, attention, and adaptation intertwined, forming a quiet rhythm that guided both movement and thought. Life in the submarine existed in layers: olfactory, tactile and mental blending into a single continuous experience. And within this ecosystem, men discovered endurance, habituation, and subtle comfort in the most ordinary sensations. The narrow corridors absorbed odor like soft walls, carrying faint memories of meals, labor, and shared activity. Steps echoed gently, mingling with vibration, hum, and the faint exhalation of men moving through space. Even objects held scent tools, bunks, and handles carrying the memory of hands and sweat. Awareness of odor became integrated, an unconscious element guiding navigation, care, and attention, without conscious notice. Bodies adapted to heat, humidity, and layered smells, learning to move fluidly through the subtle environment. The smell of oil, metal, and damp cloth formed a comforting constancy, a soft presence that marked both place and passage of time. Meals were consumed with appreciation, their aroma blending into the persistent atmosphere of the submarine, and through these sensory layers, the crew maintained calm, presence, and rhythm, attuned to the quiet life within steel walls. Habit and adaptation carried the day forward, softening discomfort into gentle endurance. And in this shared space, every breath became both a reminder and a meditation on life beneath the waves. Even fatigue and extended patrols could not overwhelm adaptation. The crew became accustomed to dense, layered air, integrating each scent into perception without conscious thought. Muscle memory, breathing, and attention adjusted subtly to compensate, creating a gentle rhythm that encompassed both comfort and endurance. Even meals, cleaning, and shared work left traces that were noted, yet largely unremarked upon, absorbed into a continuous olfactory landscape. The warmth, humidity, and mixture of human presence became companions rather than intrusions, providing constancy and quiet reassurance. Shadows of movement and dim light framed each activity, softening attention while reinforcing orientation. Awareness of odor was present yet gentle, forming a layer of experience both grounding and persistent. And as days merged into nights, the crew moved fluidly through the submarine's set scentscape. Neither distracted nor disturbed, life beneath the waves persisted quietly, measured in labor, adaptation, and subtle integration. And in this ongoing balance, the submarine became not just a vessel, but a shared living ecosystem of body, presence, and endurance. Men eventually stopped noticing the smell altogether, yet it remained as a silent backdrop, shaping presence and behavior. The vessel carried memory in odor, subtle yet constant, marking routines, meals, and the passage of time. Each breath reinforced adaptation, blending past, present, and expectation into an unconscious rhythm. Even the most mundane tasks became part of this sensory map, movements and attention guided by familiarity and subtle awareness. The persistent mixture of metal, oil, sweat, and damp clothing created continuity, connecting body, mind, and vessel. Conversations, laughter, and quiet reflection shared these scented markers, embedding collective experience into the fabric of life. Men moved with ease through corridors, bunks, and workspaces, instinctively attuned to the environment that once demanded attention. And in this quiet habituation, comfort emerged in a subtle, almost invisible form, a steady presence beneath the waves. Time became layered, scented, and soft, guiding both awareness and repose. And through the olfactory tapestry of the submarine, the crew discovered a quiet resilience, a gentle endurance that carried them forward. Even in moments of rest, the scent of the submarine lingered, a soft and constant reminder of shared existence. Hammocks, bunks, and corridors retained traces of bodies, labor, and meals, creating a continuous backdrop for relaxation and vigilance. The warmth and moisture of confined air became familiar, comforting, and integrated into perception. Every breath carried subtle reminders of presence, effort, and adaptation, reinforcing rhythm and endurance. The mixture of metallic tang, oil, and human activity became part of the internal landscape, shaping thought as quietly as it shaped action. Even dreams absorbed these sensory layers, blending them into unconscious reflection of place, body, and time. Men awoke slowly, carrying the olfactory memory forward into waking hours, undisturbed yet quietly anchored. Awareness and adaptation merged seamlessly, forming a soft, continuous meditation on life within steel walls. The submarine persisted as a living ecosystem, both vessel and habitat, infused with presence, attention, and subtle endurance. And through this ongoing immersion, the crew learned patience, habituation, and a quiet, persistent calm beneath the waves. Through the periscope, the ocean became a world of distant shapes and subtle motion, a landscape measured in shadows and light. Commanders watched quietly, eyes straining to interpret each ripple, mast, and wake. As the vessel moved silently below, fleets on the horizon appeared like faint spectres, their presence both commanding attention and requiring restraint. Even from beneath the waves, the sound of the sea seemed to carry information, hinting at movement and distance beyond what sight could confirm. Men leaned close to instruments, adjusting focus, tracing course, and noting angles, all with gentle care. The periscope was a bridge between hidden vulnerability and calculated awareness, a conduit for decision and anticipation. Time slowed in these moments, each second filled with measured observation, thought, and quiet calculation. The sun reflected softly off distant waters, marking movement and distance without breaking the calm. Shadows shifted across waves, creating patterns that required attention and subtle interpretation. And through the periscope, the crew became both witness and participant in a delicate, unseen dialogue with the world above. Convoys moved steadily, distant but distinct, a rhythmic procession of shapes and colors against the water. Each ship's silhouette offered clues, hints of speed, size, and purpose, inviting quiet analysis. Commanders adjusted course, recording distance and angle with soft diligence, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of hidden presence. Even the subtle sway of the submarine beneath the waves was felt and measured, a silent companion to observation. Men remained attentive but calm, their movements guided by experience, instinct, and the gentle cadence of the vessel. Light shifted slowly over the horizon, highlighting masts, funnels, and flags, without urgency or alarm. The periscope became a tool of patience, framing both potential and restraint in the quiet rhythm of time. Each observation informed strategy, yet carried the soft weight of responsibility and anticipation. The air was filled with quiet focus, the hum of machinery and distant movement blending into a steady undercurrent. And in this rising awareness, the crew balanced attention, calm, and readiness, suspended beneath the surface. Enemy warships appeared as silent giants on the distant horizon, their movement measured and deliberate. Commanders interpreted each ripple, shadow, and silhouette, imagining depth, speed, and intention without rush. The periscope magnified distance and detail alike, creating both intimacy and restraint, a delicate tension of sight and decision. Men exchanged soft murmurs, subtle signals, or gestures, maintaining calm while sharing perception. Even in these moments, the vessel's gentle pulse was felt through hull and floor, reminding each crew member of presence and connection. Shadows and reflections danced across the waves, offering clues to movement and potential threat. Observation became an art of quiet patience, blending instinct, knowledge, and soft calculation. Time seemed to stretch, each second measured against shifting light, distant wake, and subtle movement. And as the periscope revealed more of the unseen world, attention remained steady, calm, and deliberate. Every distant shape became a story, both a mystery and a guide in the silent dialogue of the ocean. The act of watching carried weight, a gentle tension beneath the steady calm of the submarine. Men remained still, voices low, movements deliberate, respecting both space and silence. Each glance through the periscope was both a moment of knowledge and an exercise in restraint, balancing curiosity and caution. The ocean moved in slow, rhythmic waves, reflecting sky, wind, and distance with gentle unpredictability. Commanders traced angles and bearings quietly, translating observation into thoughtful anticipation. Even the faintest shimmer of sunlight off a deck or mast drew attention, interpreted carefully without haste. Hands moved fluidly, adjusting focus, recording notes, and tracking subtle movements as the submarine drifted beneath. Shadows deepened and softened in tandem with the rising sun, providing gentle contrast for observation. And in this delicate choreography, perception, patience, and calm intertwined, forming a quiet rhythm of awareness beneath the surface. The crew became attuned to both presence and absence, reading the ocean as both guide and companion. Observation required blending detail and intuition, a careful weaving of known patterns and subtle anomaly. Fleets moved with intention, yet the distance and perspective demanded gentle deduction and quiet hypothesis. Each vessel wake and distant reflection carried meaning, a subtle conversation between what could be seen and what must be inferred. Men learned to trust silence as much as sight, interpreting the space between motion and stillness. Instruments offered guidance without intrusion, their soft hum supporting attention rather than distracting from it. Shadows shifted slowly across the water, carrying hints of change, challenge, and subtle opportunity. The periscope provided both extension and restraint, allowing eyes to reach where feet and hull could not. And in these quiet moments of watchfulness, tension and calm coexisted, a gentle rise in awareness beneath steady observation. Each moment offered potential, a quiet story unfolding on distant waves, and the crew remained poised, attentive, and patient, immersed in the subtle language of the ocean's surface. Even as shapes moved closer or further, the rhythm of observation persisted, steady and unbroken. Time became a series of measured glances, soft interpretations, and subtle adjustments to focus and awareness. Each new silhouette, wave or reflection added detail, enhancing understanding without urgency or alarm. The vessel beneath remained quiet, steady, and responsive, a safe harbor for attention and thought. Men moved with deliberation, adjusting instruments, recording distances, and sharing quiet notes without breaking concentration. Light and shadow played across distant decks, funnel tops and rigging, offering cues to speed and orientation. Even small changes in motion or reflection carried meaning, interpreted with soft precision and care. And through the periscope, the crew balanced knowledge and patience, tension and calm, observation and restraint. Each passing moment reinforced vigilance while nurturing quiet endurance. And in this slow, deliberate rhythm, presence and awareness merged into a single, measured heartbeat beneath the waves. The ocean remained a fluid, shifting canvas, distant ships like ghosts against its subtle patterns. Men absorbed each nuance, noting color, wake, mast height, and alignment in a gentle, persistent awareness. Commanders anticipated movement with quiet calculation, guided by intuition and careful observation rather than haste. Even when shapes disappeared over the horizon, attention remained, tracing the memory of motion and potential return. Shadows shifted softly with sun and clouds, guiding perception without abruptness or alarm. Instruments and hull provided a gentle sense of stability, anchoring awareness even as distance created uncertainty. Every observation was a meditation in patience, blending focus, endurance, and the soft hum of machinery beneath. And through this careful attention, the crew learnt to read the ocean as both guide and teacher, subtle and unhurried. Presence, calm, and watchfulness coalesced, forming a quiet vigilance that carried forward beneath steel and water. And within this balance, life beneath the surface unfolded with gentle tension and enduring rhythm. Observation carried lessons beyond immediate measurement, shaping thought, patience, and awareness in equal measure. Even when distant vessels vanished from view, their passage left impressions informing the quiet rhythm of patrol. Men absorbed this information slowly, integrating motion, shadow, and reflection into understanding without urgency. The periscope became a bridge between hidden world and distant presence, balancing curiosity, restraint, and careful anticipation. Time expanded in these moments, each second carrying meaning, reflection, and subtle calculation. Shadows, light, and distant shapes merged into a soft, continuous dialogue of attention and patience. Even minor shifts in motion, wake, or funnel placement required observation, interpretation, and gentle response. And in the stillness between glimpses, the crew maintained calm focus, quiet endurance, and a steady pulse of awareness. Each distant ghost of the ocean carried story, mystery, and the potential for subtle action. And through this soft vigilance, the submarine, the men, and the ocean became part of the same gentle rhythm of presence beneath the waves. The moment of attack began with stillness, a careful holding of breath and awareness, as the target came into focus through the periscope. Torpedoes were readied, adjustments made to speed, angle, and depth, each decision measured with calm precision. The ocean carried movement subtly, waves reflecting light and distance, masking the silent vessel below. Men waited quietly, instruments guiding judgment, hands steady yet attentive, eyes absorbing every detail without haste. Even the gentle vibration of the submarine seemed magnified, a reminder of presence and potential. When the order came, the torpedoes were launched, slipping into the dark water with faint, almost imperceptible motion. Silence returned immediately, as if the ocean itself held its breath, waiting for consequence. Every heartbeat, glance, and shift carried meaning, awareness sharpened yet contained. Shadows of the target lingered briefly, uncertain and soft, while anticipation settled into a deep, steady rhythm. And through this suspended moment, the crew balanced calm, tension, and focused presence beneath the waves. The seconds stretched long, measured only by the subtle hum of machinery and the gentle pulse of the hull. Men listened intently, reading instruments and gauges with soft diligence, interpreting vibration, distance, and motion. The world above moved almost imperceptibly, distant shapes reflecting light and shadow in quiet progression. A faint tremor passed through the water, soft yet undeniable, signaling contact far ahead. Even the most practiced eyes lingered on movement, noting angle, speed, and wake with patient precision. Hands hovered near controls, poised to adjust, respond, and maintain balance within the submarine. The stillness amplified subtle sensation, each creak, hiss, or vibration becoming meaningful without urgency. And in this quiet anticipation, focus and patience merged, a calm tension stretching through every compartment and along every corridor. Time slowed, measured not in minutes, but in attention, endurance, and quiet observation. And beneath the surface, the submarine held itself steady, the hunter in the vast, attentive dark. When confirmation came, subtle yet clear, relief and quiet pride passed like whispers through the crew. Instruments registered the result, and soft murmurs acknowledged success without breaking the calm. Even with success, vigilance remained, awareness sharpened by the delicate balance between action and consequence. The ocean seemed to exhale slowly, waves carrying the faint memory of motion and disturbance. Men moved fluidly, attending instruments, listening posts, and engine adjustments, with continued careful precision. Shadows shifted in dim light, framing hands, faces, and instruments in gentle contrast. The subtle pulse of the submarine beneath remained steady, carrying rhythm, heat, and vibration that grounded attention. Even in these moments of triumph, silence held authority, reminding men of presence, risk, and responsibility. And as the seconds stretched into minutes, calm returned, mingled with an undercurrent of soft, attentive tension. Life below the waves continued, steady, measured, and quietly aware of what had passed. The counterattack began almost imperceptibly, distant thuds and vibrations traveling through the water like faint echoes. Depth charges were dropped far above, their presence felt more than heard, subtle and insistent. Men adjusted position, monitored pressure, and attended gauges with practiced calm, responding through motion and observation rather than haste. Even the gentle rocking and vibration of the hull carried meaning, interpreted quietly, each creak and pulse guiding awareness. Instruments provided steady feedback, bridging human senses with the hidden motion of water and depth. Shadows and dim lights framed careful gestures, movement and observation without breaking rhythm. Each thud resonated through steel and air, felt in muscle and sinew, yet attention remained deliberate and calm. The contrast of sudden threat with enduring silence heightened awareness, sharpening perception without intrusion. And through this delicate tension, the crew navigated response, preserving both vessel and calm beneath the waves. Patience, skill, and quiet endurance became a measured, living rhythm of survival and vigilance. Even as distance and water absorbed the noise of depth charges, the echo remained in minds and bodies alike. Awareness sharpened subtly, muscles coiled gently, eyes tracing instruments, and hands hovered near controls. The submarine moved carefully, adjusting depth and trim with soft deliberation, guided by vibration, pressure, and intuition. Men shared quiet signals, nods, and gestures, coordinating action without breaking the calm. Shadows shifted along narrow corridors, pooling around feet, controls, and instruments, accentuating careful attention. The pulse of engines, warm air, and faint hum of machinery intertwined with the gentle threat above. Each passing moment demanded focus, patience, and an awareness that extended beyond immediate sight. And through this measured engagement, tension and calm coexisted, forming a quiet yet intense rhythm beneath the waves. Observation and subtle adjustment became both meditation and survival, guiding breath, thought, and movement. And in this space, the hunter and hunted existed as part of the same silent, enduring ocean rhythm. Time became elastic, stretching with a subtle pulse of sonar, hull, and distant pressure, marking seconds with vibration and breath. Men adjusted valves, recorded data, and monitored instruments in a soft, deliberate cadence. Even in the midst of threat, movement remained fluid, controlled, and careful, a choreography of attention and quiet endurance. Shadows deepened beneath lamps, revealing hands, faces, and gauges in muted contrast, emphasizing presence and measurement. The water above, restless yet distant, carried both threat and subtle guidance, influencing every calculation. Breathing was measured, shared through collective attention, synchronizing observation, vigilance, and response. Even the faintest ripple or distant echo carried significance, interpreted with soft, precise awareness. And as the seconds stretched into minutes, calm persisted, blended with focused anticipation and the quiet authority of knowledge. Each subtle motion, adjustment, and glance reinforced resilience, patience, and the slow pulse of enduring vigilance. And beneath the surface, life continued in rhythm with the ocean, machinery, and mind. When the attack subsided, a soft sigh of release passed through the vessel, mingled with quiet reflection and gentle awareness. Men checked instruments, reassessed depth, and monitored the subtle pulse of water and steel with enduring calm. The echoes of action lingered faintly, absorbed into hull, water, and memory, without urgency. Shadows shifted slowly, dim lights tracing familiar corridors, instruments, and hands in soft contrast. Even as tension waned, vigilance persisted, a gentle, underlying rhythm of preparedness and observation. Every motion, breath, and vibration carried meaning, softly reminding the crew of presence, effort, and endurance. The submarine remained alive with the pulse of machinery, water, and human awareness, each element harmonizing in quiet rhythm. Time seemed to unfold slowly, measured by breath, hum, and attention rather than minutes. And in the aftermath of activity, calm and focus coexisted, allowing the crew to carry forward with soft resilience. Life beneath the waves continued, balanced between action, observation, and enduring quiet. The ocean returned to its more familiar rhythm, distant waves carrying subtle motion, light and shadow across its surface. Men adjusted positions, attended gauges, and breathed deeply, integrating experience, attention, and response. Even the faintest vibration became a marker of presence and endurance, grounding the body and mind. Shadows shifted slowly under the warm hum of machinery, framing careful attention and fluid movement. Instruments whispered softly, providing continuity, guidance, and gentle reassurance to focused minds. Awareness persisted as a quiet companion, integrating the memory of action, anticipation, and response. Even in subtle relaxation, readiness remained, a steady pulse beneath calm observation, and through this quiet aftermath, the crew learned to merge patience, endurance, and careful attention into a single rhythm of life. Each breath, glance, and gesture reflected continuity, experience, and soft mastery. And beneath the steel, water, and light, the submarine pulsed quietly with the gentle, enduring rhythm of vigilance. Even in the depths, men sought meaning beyond the hull, beyond instruments, beyond orders. Tiny charms hung from bunks or instrument panels, worn smooth by hands and time, carrying hope and quiet reassurance. Some whispered prayers under their breath, soft syllables lost in the hum of machinery, yet persistent and steady. Rituals became subtle anchors, adjusting a watch in a certain pattern, crossing oneself before a patrol, or gently tapping a charm for luck. Silence embraced these gestures, giving them weight without disturbance. The faint echo of past tradition mingled with the hum of engines, creating a calm sense of continuity. Even the youngest or most skeptical learned to notice, perhaps participate, perhaps only observe, absorbing reassurance like warm air. Moments of reflection were unhurried, measured, and private, yet shared in the collective consciousness of the vessel. Each act carried both intention and comfort, a quiet defiance of uncertainty beneath steel walls. And through these gentle rituals, faith, superstition, and habit intertwined, forming a subtle rhythm of calm and endurance. Some men traced small crosses on instruments or bunks, fingers moving slowly, as if touching the vessel itself might transfer protection. Others lingered at personal tokens, photographs tucked safely in lockers, carrying soft memory of home and distant life. Even the hum of machinery became a backdrop to these gestures, steady and grounding beneath whispered thought. Moments of prayer were rarely spoken aloud, but their presence resonated in posture, gaze, and attention. The air seemed to hold subtle weight during these rituals, carrying scent, vibration, and warmth in quiet accompaniment. Hands adjusted instruments or tools gently, combining action with reflection, blending care with intention. Shadows along corridors and bunks framed these gestures, softening their presence while emphasizing quiet meaning. And through this subtle network of faith and habit, each sailor discovered a personal cadence of reassurance. Time slowed in reflection, each second measured in gesture, breath, and awareness. And beneath the steel and water, meaning persisted quietly, offering calm in a world of uncertainty. Even superstition found its place in the rhythm of life. Small acts repeated with unthinking care. The tapping of a charm, the careful folding of a piece of clothing, or the soft alignment of tools became gestures of protection. Men did not always speak of these habits, yet they persisted, woven into daily routine, with gentle insistence. The vessel itself absorbed these gestures, the weight of attention and habit lending invisible structure to corridors and bunks. The smell of oil, metal, and human presence mingled with whispered thought, grounding awareness in both body and environment. Shadows and dim light traced careful hands and thoughtful eyes, emphasizing presence without urgency. Even laughter or small talk carried a faint echo of ritual subtly reinforced in tone and gesture. And through repetition, attention and belief, calm emerged quietly, layered beneath observation, duty, and endurance. Moments of reflection became gentle pauses in rhythm, allowing thought, memory, and hope to coexist. And in these moments, faith and habit intertwined, forming a soft, enduring current beneath the waves. Some gestures were communal, subtle yet unifying, a quiet alignment of attention in the vessel sep's shared space. A whispered word, a nod, a glance toward a lucky object carried meaning understood without conversation. Even in silence, a shared sense of ritual bound crew to crew, presence to presence, creating continuity across space and time. Hands moved with care, observing machinery, adjusting valves, or simply resting, the body participating in habit while the mind reflected quietly. Shadows and light emphasized posture, line, and gesture, creating a rhythm felt rather than spoken. The air vibrated softly with warmth, movement, and subtle hum, carrying both presence and intention. Even small repetitions, unnoticed by some, reinforced structure, hope, and calm in a world of uncertainty. And through these soft, shared practices, individual reflection became part of the collective rhythm of endurance. Each breath, gesture, and glance contributed to a subtle architecture of reassurance beneath steel walls. And in this quiet network of belief and habit, the vessel became both protector and witness to human presence. Faith and superstition intertwined with observation, each gesture bridging uncertainty with intention. The creak of hull, hum of engines, and vibration of machinery became companions in ritual, echoing both movement and protection. Men observed instruments with care, adjusted valves, or tidied tools, blending action and reflection into a single, gentle rhythm. The warmth of bodies, close quarters, and shared effort carried weight in subtle, comforting ways. Even the smallest tokens, worn smooth by hands and attention, radiated calm, persistence, and continuity. Shadows shifted softly beneath dim lamps, tracing gestures, faces, and objects in muted contrast, reinforcing awareness. Each repetition strengthened patience, endurance, and quiet presence, softening uncertainty into routine. And through this merging of habit, faith, and observation, attention became a subtle meditation, carried in thought, breath, and movement. The vessel itself seemed to hum with participation, responding to care, respect, and quiet ritual. And beneath the waves, presence, belief, and endurance flowed gently together, an invisible current of reassurance and calm. Even in private reflection, gestures were precise, quiet, and deliberate, each touch, alignment, or glance carrying meaning. Photographs, trinkets, and small objects became anchors, connecting body, mind, and memory in gentle resonance. The hum of machinery, the warmth of the hull, and the faint vibration of water accompanied these rituals, grounding attention. Men traced letters, adjusted charms, or whispered soft words, creating a quiet rhythm that balanced presence and hope. Shadows shifted with time, reflecting subtle movement, posture, and alignment in dim light. Even the faintest sound, metal against metal, breath, or distant hum, added depth to awareness and intention. Repetition softened anxiety, blending ritual, habit, and mindfulness into a gentle cadence of calm. And through these subtle practices, moments of reflection became both meditation and reassurance beneath the waves. Attention, faith, and observation merged, forming a quiet, enduring presence within steel walls. And within this careful, deliberate space, men found solace, patience, and a gentle rhythm of life below the surface. Shared superstition and ritual created bonds invisible but strong, tying crew to crew through small, deliberate acts. A glance, a touch, or a whispered acknowledgement carried more weight than words, reinforcing calm and collective attention. Even objects became conduits of memory and reassurance, tokens of home, luck, or protection integrated into daily life. The vessel itself absorbed these gestures, the hum of machinery echoing human intention in soft resonance. Shadows and dim light framed subtle actions, emphasizing presence, movement, and thought without distraction. Men moved fluidly through ritual and habit, aligning with both vessel and crew in gentle, deliberate rhythm. Awareness became layered, action, reflection, and superstition intertwined, forming a continuous undercurrent of calm. And in these shared practices, the crew discovered a soft architecture of reassurance, quietly stabilizing attention and presence. Each repetition, each gesture, each glance reinforced calm, endurance, and subtle connection beneath steel walls. And through this gentle, persistent current, life beneath the waves carried on in quiet balance and rhythm. Even the most skeptical men came to notice, participate, or at least absorb the comfort of quiet ritual. charm, token, or whispered word offered reassurance without needing to be declared aloud. The hum of engines and vibration of steel carried these gestures, grounding both mind and body in gentle continuity. Shadows shifted slowly, with subtle movement, tracing posture, attention, and careful gesture with muted authority. Hands rested on objects, adjusted instruments, or lingered over tokens with soft attention, creating calm without effort. Each repetition reinforced awareness, endurance, and subtle reassurance, blending individual and collective habit into one quiet rhythm. Moments of reflection, prayer, or superstition became soft anchors in time, creating pauses and gentle breath beneath the waves. And through these acts, calm and focus were maintained, forming a subtle, continuous meditation on presence and endurance. Life below the surface became rhythm, reflection, and quiet belief woven into every breath, every gesture, every thought. And within this slow, deliberate current, the crew discovered gentle meaning, quiet hope, and enduring calm in steel and water. Even after long hours, rituals persisted, carried through fatigue, monotony, and reflection. Men adjusted, whispered, and touched tokens with gentle consistency, embedding calm into the rhythm of life. The air carried the hum of machinery, vibration, warmth, and quiet presence, wrapping each gesture in continuity. Shadows and dim light traced attention, movement, and posture, with soft emphasis, guiding subtle awareness. Objects, charms, and photographs became conduits of memory, hope, and belief, grounding both body and mind. Repetition shaped attention, habit, and quiet meditation, allowing presence to persist beneath stress or uncertainty. Even silence became meaningful, a companion to reflection, prayer, and ritual in the vessel's enclosed space. And through the gentle weaving of faith, superstition, and habit, men discovered continuity, reassurance, and soft endurance beneath steel walls. The rhythm of attention, care, and reflection persisted, a quiet pulse beneath the waves, and in this calm, measured space, life endured, anchored by ritual, observation, and the persistent thread of human hope. As the submarine sank deeper, every creak and groan of steel became a conversation, subtle yet impossible to ignore. The hull shifted with pressure, bolts straining quietly, producing sounds that vibrated through floor, walls, and bone. Men listened intently, trained to interpret pitch, rhythm, and duration, aware that each note carried meaning beyond simple noise. Even the faintest hiss of water against metal seemed amplified, echoing in the confined spaces with careful persistence. The deeper the vessel descended, the more the awareness of fragility took shape, a quiet, almost abstract presence that hovered in the mind. Lights glimmered softly across instruments and faces, casting gentle shadows that emphasized the rhythm of motion and attention. The hum of machinery mingled with metal sips complaint, forming a layered backdrop of sound that was both grounding and disquieting. Breathing became deliberate, measured, synchronized with observation, as men sought calm in the presence of silent threat. Shadows shifted slowly along corridors, tracing posture, hands, and attentive eyes, reinforcing awareness without alarm. And through these quiet, measured moments, the crew learned to exist in harmony with tension, steel, and depth. Pressure increased gradually, felt as a subtle weight on chest and ears, a reminder of water pressing steadily from every direction. Instruments were monitored carefully, each gauge and dial read with calm diligence, translating numbers into comfort or caution. The whole groaned in irregular rhythm, soft and distant, then closer, vibrating through the floors like a gentle pulse of the ocean itself. Even minor adjustments, turning a valve, checking a hatch, or fine-tuning the engines, became acts of meditation, blending care with observation. Men moved with quiet awareness, anticipating each sound and responding with practiced subtlety. Shadows shifted with every adjustment, highlighting hands, faces, and instruments in dim contrast that emphasized presence and intent. The faint scent of oil and metal mingled with recycled air, grounding perception in body as well as mind. Even silence carried weight, thick with awareness, as each creak seemed to resonate in the chest and imagination. And through this attentive observation, fear was tempered with knowledge, presence, and patience, creating a rhythm of calm vigilance. Beneath steel and water, awareness became both shield and companion, a quiet dialogue with depth and pressure. Every subtle complaint of metal was noted, catalogued, and understood with careful attention. Bolts and seams produced occasional pops or whispers, soft and uneven, echoing across bulkheads in delicate patterns. Even the hum of machinery became part of this layered soundscape, a reassuring anchor amidst uncertainty. Men held posture and breath carefully, adjusting their stance and hands to remain steady and attentive. Shadows and light emphasized subtle shifts, movements and angles guiding perception without urgency. The vessel set's pulse and vibration intertwined with human awareness, forming a rhythm that carried both calm and alertness. Each subtle noise reinforced presence, patience, and quiet engagement with the environment, and as depth increased, anticipation became meditative, a measured attention to change, stress, and resilience. Even fear was filtered through knowledge, observation, and endurance, transformed into calm awareness beneath steel walls. And in this rhythm, the submarine and its crew existed as one, harmonized with depth, pressure, and subtle motion. The psychological effect of depth was both subtle and profound, shaping attention and reflection. Men noted small changes, creaks growing slightly louder, air moving differently, instruments flickering in response to pressure shifts. Even the smallest vibration of a footstep or valve adjustment seemed amplified, resonating through confined corridors and bunks. The mind, attuned to risk, interpreted every sound with care, transforming simple noise into layered meaning. Shadows deepened in tandem with the growing weight of water, emphasizing posture, focus, and subtle gestures of attention. Breathing synchronized with observation, steadying both mind and body against awareness of fragility. The hum of engines and machinery became a companion, soft yet persistent, marking continuity amidst quiet tension. And through this attentive, reflective engagement, fear became a tool for patience, observation, and resilience. Every subtle sound, vibration, and shadow contributed to a rhythm of endurance beneath steel and pressure. And beneath the waves, life adjusted, aligning with tension, depth, and attentive presence. Each groan or pop of metal was both warning and reassurance, a reminder of limits and durability. Men calibrated instruments, valves, and trim with gentle precision, translating subtle feedback into calm action. Even a minor adjustment produced a cascade of sensory information, soft and continuous, interpreted with practiced awareness. Shadows and dim lights framed movement and attention, guiding perception without intruding upon concentration. Breathing and posture were aligned with sound, depth, and movement, creating a rhythm of both calm and vigilance. The smell of metal, oil, and recycled air threaded through the cabin, tying perception to body and mind. Even the vibration of the hull beneath boots and hands became a subtle meditation, a tactile connection to environment and machinery. And as the submarine sank further, observation, patience, and careful attention merged into one continuous measured rhythm. Awareness carried the weight of depth without overwhelming it, forming a balance of presence, knowledge, and endurance. And beneath the steel envelope, the crew learned to inhabit tension as quietly and deliberately as breathing itself. Time stretched differently at depth, measured by creaks, gauges, and quiet pulses rather than hours or minutes. Each sound, vibration, and shadow became a marker, a subtle guide to position, stress, and response. Men adjusted with care, moving through corridors, bunks, and controls in a slow, deliberate dance with steel and pressure. The hull responded with subtle groans and whispers, a dialogue of presence, stress, and resilience interpreted attentively by the crew. Even the recycled air seemed different, heavier with depth, carrying warmth, smell, and the faint hum of life below. Shadows elongated and softened in the gentle lamps, emphasizing posture, hands, and attentive faces in quiet contrast. Breathing, posture, and attention became intertwined, forming a rhythm that balanced calm with awareness of fragility. Every sound was noted, every movement intentional, each moment blending observation, endurance, and quiet reflection. And through this attentive practice, the submarine and crew existed in quiet harmony with the ocean's weight. Each subtle groan and shiver of steel became a rhythm, a pulse, and a guide beneath the waves. The vessel itself seemed to respond to depth, pulsing and sighing with faint awareness of weight and pressure. Bolts and seams whispered softly, announcing stress and resilience in subtle language understood by attentive ears. Even machinery contributed to this conversation, its gentle hum marking continuity amidst tension. Men moved fluidly, adjusting controls, checking instruments, and aligning themselves with rhythm and pressure. Shadows traced hands, faces, and instruments in soft contrast, emphasizing presence, thought, and attention. Air shifted gently, carrying warmth, vibration, and the faint scent of metal, oil, and human presence. Each creak and pop became both signal and meditation, guiding focus and awareness without alarm. And as the submarine descended, attention and calm intertwined, forming a quiet, enduring rhythm with depth and steel. Observation became both mindfulness and survival, a gentle practice of presence in challenging conditions. And beneath the waves, life continued, synchronized with hull, machinery, and the subtle music of pressure and persistence. Even the awareness of fragility was transformed into quiet focus, a gentle teacher of patience and vigilance. Men interpreted subtle sounds, vibrations, and visual cues with calm diligence, responding with measured action rather than haste. The hum of machinery, warmth of the hull, and movement of water became companions in observation and mindfulness. Shadows and dim lights highlighted careful gestures, attentive faces, and steady hands in quiet rhythm. Every groan, creak, or hiss became a lesson in presence, endurance, and attentive perception. Breathing, posture, and movement aligned with observation, creating a meditative cadence beneath steel and pressure. Even uncertainty was tempered by knowledge, observation, and shared awareness, forming a quiet structure of reassurance. And through this attentive harmony, tension and calm coexisted, shaping thought, habit, and presence into a measured rhythm. Depth became a teacher, silence a companion, and steel a guide to endurance and reflection. And beneath the waves, The submarine and its crew moved as one, attuned to pressure, sound, and the subtle heartbeat of life below the surface. The submarine broke the surface slowly, steel meeting water with a soft, deliberate motion that carried a sense of relief and quiet anticipation. Cool air rushed gently into the vessel, carrying the scent of salt, seaweed, and endless horizon, a stark contrast to recycled air below. Men climbed slowly onto the deck, muscles stiff from long hours in confined spaces, eyes adjusting to the vast openness above. The stars lingered faintly, scattered and delicate, fading slowly as the first hints of dawn colored the sky with soft pinks and blues. A few men lit cigarettes, the smoke curling in slow, quiet spirals against the crisp air, mingling with the faint mist rising from the sea. Voices were low, laughter rare but gentle, carried softly across the deck as companions shared the moment. Even the hum of the submarine seemed to soften, blending with the whisper of water against hull. Each breath of fresh air became a small luxury, a reminder of freedom and the world beyond steel walls. Shadows from low lamps stretched along the deck, merging with the pale light of dawn in subtle contrast. And beneath this fragile, quiet world, the crew felt the pulse of calm patience and the promise of day. Men walked slowly along the deck, fingers grazing cold metal and ropes, grounding themselves in sensation and presence. The horizon stretched endlessly, a delicate line between water and sky that invited thought and quiet reflection. Even the distant hum of waves carried meaning, a soft rhythm that resonated with the body and mind alike. Conversation was minimal, replaced by gentle observation, and the shared understanding of small freedoms earned the chill in the air, contrasted with warmth from exertion and lingering body heat, forming a sensory harmony of awareness and comfort. Shadows lengthened and shifted subtly, tracing hands, faces, and the gentle curvature of the hull in muted detail. The faint glimmer of distant clouds reflected soft light onto calm water, emphasizing depth, distance, and stillness. Each exhalation, each footstep, and each gesture became part of a slow, shared rhythm, soothing both body and thought. Even the distant cry of a seabird felt gentle, integrated into the hush of morning and the vastness of sea. And through this slow emergence into light, life aboard the submarine felt balanced, grounded, and quietly alive. The gentle rise of sun brought warmth gradually, brushing steel and water with soft illumination. Men paused frequently, gazing at the horizon, inhaling the salt-tinged air with deep, unhurried breaths. Smoke from cigarettes lingered, caught in the quiet currents above, creating slow, twisting patterns of ephemeral presence. The deck creaked gently under feet, a subtle reminder of the submarine set's weight and the persistent pulse of machinery below. Even mundane movements, adjusting ropes, leaning against railings, lifting a hand to eyes, became measured, reflective, and deliberate. The light strengthened slowly, revealing subtle textures in water and steel, casting muted shadows along the deck and rail. Each man carried a small, private awareness, thoughts drifting to home, to memory, or to the vastness beyond. Silence became a companion, carrying both peace and presence, softening the contrast between confinement below and openness above. Breath, movement, and gaze merged into a single rhythm of calm and attention. And as the sun edged higher, even the smallest gestures felt imbued with wonder and quiet significance. The ocean spread endlessly, a mosaic of soft colors, reflections, and gentle ripples that seemed to pulse with life beneath quiet air. Men leaned over the railing, watching the subtle motion of water, each swell and eddy drawing the eye and softening thought. Even distant clouds, slow-moving and delicate, created patterns of light and shadow on the surface, offering small meditation. The cold air carried a faint tang of seaweed, salt and warmth from sunlight beginning to pierce the horizon. Conversations remained hushed, punctuated only by soft laughter or shared observations that drifted gently on the wind. Shadows shifted slowly beneath hands, faces, and instruments, blending with muted sunlight in seamless rhythm. Breath became deliberate, measured, syncing with gentle movement and observation of surroundings. The horizon felt simultaneously vast and intimate, offering both openness and quiet focus. Even the vibration of the submarine beneath the deck became a companion, a reminder of life and continuity below. And through this fragile equilibrium, the crew absorbed calm, wonder, and a gentle pulse of connection to the world above and beyond. A soft haze lingered over water, blurring line and distance, creating a sense of infinite space and gentle mystery. Men adjusted clothing against the morning chill, feeling texture, warmth, and the subtle pressure of fabric on skin. The hum of life below remained present, yet unobtrusive, a quiet counterpoint to the openness of sky and sea. Smoke drifted lazily, mingling with fresh air, marking presence and shared rhythm without haste or urgency. Even small gestures, turning ahead, exhaling slowly, touching rail, became imbued with significance, grounding attention in body and mind. Shadows lengthened and shifted gently across steel and water, accentuating form, depth, and delicate contrast. Each inhalation carried cool freshness, a soft reminder of distance from confined air and machinery. The horizon remained patient, distant yet persistent, offering continuity, perspective, and quiet observation. Awareness blended with presence, observation, and the gentle rhythm of life afloat. And in this fragile dawn, every subtle detail contributed to calm reflection and the quiet joy of openness. Men smoked slowly, the warmth of breath mingling with cool air, a tactile connection to the freedom above. Eyes traced waves, distant clouds, and subtle reflections, grounding thought and calming the mind. The faint hiss of water against steel blended with soft motion, creating a rhythm both gentle and persistent. Hands rested casually on rail, instruments, or companions, absorbing warmth, texture, and presence. Even slight sounds, the flapping of a loose rope, the creak of deck, or soft exhalation, seemed magnified in stillness without urgency. Shadows shifted with rising sun, tracing faces, fingers, and the curvature of the deck in quiet contrast. Small freedoms, a stretch, a glance, a shared smile, felt amplified, meaningful, and deeply human. Breath, gaze, and movement merged into gentle rhythm, reinforcing calm and awareness. The horizon, slow to change yet constant, became a companion to thought, observation, and reflection. And beneath this soft sky, life above the waves seemed fragile, patient, and endlessly alive. The sun rose steadily, brushing deck and water with warmth that replaced chill with soft, gentle heat. Men adjusted posture, relaxed shoulders, and allowed attention to drift along waves' horizon and slow movement of clouds. Smoke spiraled lazily, dissolving into the pale light, carrying presence and quiet meditation across air and space. Each step, gesture, and exhalation was measured, deliberate, yet effortless, blending observation and subtle joy. Shadows softened and elongated, emphasizing textures, contours, and movement without distraction. Even the distant hum of engines and hull below was absorbed into gentle perception, providing continuity and grounding. Breath deepened, filled with salt and cool warmth, threading through body and mind alike. The vast openness, slowly illuminated, offered quiet perspective, patience, and presence, balancing confined hours below with fragile freedom above. Awareness merged with observation, environment, and subtle motion, forming a rhythm both gentle and enduring. And through these quiet moments, the crew absorbed calm, reflection, and the fragile, immense beauty of surfacing at dawn. Men lingered on the deck as light strengthened, savoring the subtle shift from night to day. The horizon deepened, waves reflecting growing warmth, each swell moving slowly, endlessly, and softly. Smoke, breath, and air intertwined with gentle movement, forming a rhythm of calm, observation, and quiet enjoyment. Hands adjusted, leaned or rested on railing, each subtle gesture grounding attention in sensation and presence. Shadows and early sunlight merged in muted contrast, emphasizing form, movement, and perspective without urgency. Even small sounds, wave lapping, distant seabird, creak of steel, became part of the gentle rhythm carried softly across deck and mind. Breath, glance, and thought blended into awareness, a slow meditation on freedom, distance, and endurance. Each man carried a quiet, private reflection, thoughts drifting to home, memory, or the vast, fragile expanse of the ocean. Presence, sensation, and calm merged into one gentle continuum of being, fragile yet persistent. And as the submarine floated, light and air, horizon and sea, offered a quiet celebration of life, freedom, and patient observation. The crew absorbed stillness, observing horizon, sky, and subtle motion of water with measured attention. Even as the sun rose higher, warmth and light moved slowly, accentuating textures, colors, and reflections on steel and sea. Breath became gentle, hands relaxed, and thought drifted lightly across memory, observation, and quiet awareness. Shadows shifted imperceptibly, tracing contours of deck, rail, and companion, forming a rhythm of presence. Small gestures, stretching, touching, glancing, carried amplified meaning, connecting body, mind, and shared environment. Smoke faded gradually, leaving only the subtle scent of tobacco, salt, and fresh air as companions to calm. Each exhalation, each shift in weight, each gaze became part of a rhythm of quiet, deliberate engagement. Awareness stretched into horizon, sky, and subtle currents, forming gentle continuity between vessel, crew, and world above. Even silence carried weight, a companion to thought, reflection, and sensation, emphasizing fragile freedom. And beneath the calm morning sky, the submarine floated, alive with gentle breath, patient attention, and quiet connection to the world beyond steel walls.